Yeah, I'm trying to.
Oh,
All right, I think we're live now. And so anyway, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 11th meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. The first thing we'll do is do our roll call. And it looks like maybe Mary's going to be doing that for us.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. Mayor Lydia Lavelle.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Councilmember Barbara Fouchie.
Present.
Councilmember Jacqueline Gist.
Present.
Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell.
Present.
Councilmember Susan Romaine.
Welcome, Mary, and I am present.
Thank you. Councilmember Damon Siles.
present. Hi, Mary.
Hi. And Councilmember Sammy Slade.
Present and hi.
Hi.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. We'll start out our meeting as we usually do with a poetry reading. And I see that Fred Joyner is in the waiting room, so we'll get him on over with us.
Good evening.
Good evening, Fred. Hi.
Good evening.
Hi, Fred.
How y'all doing?
Good, good.
Good. I'm gonna poem from this collection here. It's called Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry. So if you, those of you who don't know, Furious Flower, the Furious Flower Poetry Center is a center at James Madison University, founded by Dr. Joanne Gabbett. And it's a center for the study of African American poetry. It's one of the only things like it of its kind. And so every 10 years they convene a conference of African American poets. And so the last one was in 2014. They do other little things throughout the year, but every 10 years they do this convening. And so this is an anthology, kind of like in the spirit of that convening. This is a poem by a poet named Amanda Johnston. She's a poet from Texas, and she's been very vocal in the Black Lives Matter movement. She did this project called hashtag Black Poets Speak Out. And so this is a poem called Gender Reveal by Amanda Johnston. Before you landed on the shore of your mother, they wanted to see your nameless, soft puff of flesh. The blurry image nesting on a screen. They wanted to hold a light against the wall of your mother to see shadows so shapes might color the imagination. They laughed and raised their bats. Let's crack it open, they squealed, swinging at a donkey, its eyes and mouth glued shut. Your mother swayed, avoiding the question. The answer locked deep inside the piñata on a string of many colors. Blindfolded children bashed at its skull for sweets. The parents professed not to care either way, but the bats kept coming as the children's lips turned blue. I just thought it was an interesting way to sneak in like a Mother's Day theme.
Yeah.
And anyway, Amanda Johnston, this Furious Flower Poetry Center, this is a great little anthology. It's not so little either. You can see they have it at Epilogue and Flyleaf if you ever want to check it out. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Fred. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Sure.
All right. So moving on, folks, to our next section here, we've got a proclamation. Let's see, Mary or Kathy, if you can bring over the chief. I saw him in the waiting room there. This proclamation is titled Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day. And so, let's see. Hey there, Chief ATAC. Good to see you.
Sorry, it restarts everything when it brings you over. I apologize.
No, very good. I'm going to go ahead and read this proclamation, an annual proclamation that I do every year, Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day. Whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Carrboro Police Department. And whereas on April 29th, 1786, Sheriff Benjamin Branch of Chesterfield County, Virginia, became the first law enforcement officer to die in the line of duty in the United States. Since then, more than 22,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have paid the ultimate price during the performance of their duties, including 578 in North Carolina. And whereas over 60,000 assaults against law enforcement officers are reported each year, resulting in approximately 17,000 injuries. And whereas the 87th Congress passed Public Law 87-726, a joint resolution authorizing the president to proclaim May 15th of each year as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the calendar week during which May 15th occurs as Police Week. This was signed into law by President Kennedy on October 1st, 1962. And whereas the members of the Carrboro Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of our residents, they protect the community against deception and violence. They unceasingly provide a vital public service without which our town would not enjoy the peace and liberty we so dearly value. And whereas despite the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic, police officers continue to serve our community, risking their health and lives every day. And whereas it's important that all residents know and understand the duties and responsibilities of our law enforcement officers and acknowledge the hazards and sacrifices that are a fundamental aspect of their profession. Now, therefore, be resolved, I, Lydia Lavelle, Mayor of Carrboro, hereby proclaim the week of May 9 to 15 as Police Week and call upon all organizations and residents to commemorate law enforcement officers past and present who have rendered dedicated service to their communities. And be it further resolved, I proclaim Friday, May 14 as Peace Officers Memorial Day and call upon all residents to honor those law enforcement officers who made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their community or became disabled in the performance of their duty. This, the 4th day of May, 2021. Actually, it's the 11th. That was a little bit off, the 11th. But Chief, thank you so much for being here with us for that. If you do have any comments you want to share with us, or
No, I just want to say thank you first and foremost. I know it's important to the folks on the line to hear the support, and I think too the process that we're in can be difficult on my side of the profession as well in general. But I think it's as I've been trying to tell people, this is an important movement forward, and I think as we talk about these things going forward, I think this kind of support is critical because we want to focus on what's working and we want to fix what's not. And I think that is the beneficial way to go forward. So thank you. Thank you to the council. And thank you for the hard questions that are going to be coming, because this is a process that I think everybody will benefit from when we're on the other side of it. So just appreciate the support.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So Kathy and or Mary, do we have any charges to issue tonight to recently appointed members?
We do, and I'll bring Catherine Froelich over now.
Hello.
I brought the wrong Catherine over, I think. Oh, I think Mary brought Catherine over, and then I clicked on Kat Lazorko.
Oh, okay. Well, Kat
Mary, if you'll send Catherine Lazorko back over as an attendee. Catherine, thank you so much for being here. And Catherine was recently appointed to the Arts Committee. So what I'll do is I will read you the charge, and then after I'm finished, just say, I do. If we were in person, it would be, you can meet all the mayor and council and shake their hands and say hello, but they're very happy to see you and they appreciate the volunteers very much. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks.
As a charge, oh, you're welcome. As an Arts Committee member, I will recommend to the Town Council a policy for the selection of art to be displayed in or on public facilities. I will coordinate arrangements to have artwork displayed on town property in conjunction with the staff of the Recreation and Parks Department. I will work with the community on projects related to the arts. Members of the Arts Committee may assist in community fundraising activities, but any funds received by the committee or by members acting in their official capacity must be accounted for, and all expenditures by the committee must be made in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. Such funds may be received and expended by the town only for purposes for which the town is statutorily authorized to expend those public funds. And 4, I will report to the council as requested and perform such additional duties as the council may request from time to time. Okay. You can just say, I do if you agree.
I do.
Great.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Catherine.
Welcome,
Nice to meet
Catherine.
you.
Welcome,
Thanks,
Catherine. I
Lisa.
look forward to working with you, and I'll see you tomorrow night.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay. Council members, before we move on to announcement of upcoming meetings, let me turn it over to Randy to make a motion. Yeah, Randy, go ahead.
That we add the closed session item of economic development this evening.
All right, motion by Randy, second by, is that you, Jackie, seconding? Second by Jackie. All in favor, say aye. Jackie,
Aye.
Randy, Sammy,
Hi.
me, aye. Susan,
Aye.
Damon,
Hi.
and Barbara.
Aye.
Okay, all right, very good.
Lydia, I also had my hand up for something else for an announcement.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. This starting on Saturday, UNC will be having 4 graduations for the graduating class of undergraduates and graduate students and medical students of the class of 2021. It's an extraordinary class who spent the past 3 semesters in extraordinary situation. And they've done a wonderful job. They've been really resilient. And I think that our whole community needs to just give them a shout out and say, congratulations. If you can do this, you can do anything. But I'm really proud of our graduates. And if you see them, make sure you congratulate them. And coming from the career office, they're getting jobs. Yep, they are getting jobs. Yep,
Thanks.
don't worry. Yeah, but
Thank you.
congratulations, kids.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And we have a lot of those students in our community. So we're very proud of them for what they've been through. So, okay, let's see. Mary or Kathy, announcement of upcoming meetings.
Okay. On May 12th at 6 o'clock is the Arts Committee meeting. And also on May 12th at 7:30 is the Economic Sustainability Commission meeting. And then on May 18th, next week, is the next town council meeting at 7 p.m. So that's
Okay.
it.
All right. Very good. Damon?
The Durham Chapel Hill Carrboro MPO board meets tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock online.
Thank you, Damon. Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to come behind Jackie and ask if Pat Lazorko can give a shout out to the UNC students, saying just what she said with our congratulations to them for the 3 semesters of quarantine that they worked. I'm really glad you brought that up, Jackie. It is you know, it's a benchmark in history, and it's also in their academic careers. So thank you for raising that. And I don't know if you need a motion to ask her to do that, but I certainly would like to see Kat broadcast that. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. I think, Julie, if we could pass that along to Kat. I know she's in the other room. She's probably hearing it. Yes, Julie?
We'll make sure she knows. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I know. I mean, our students at Central, we had graduation last weekend, and I know we actually have several of my students that live in our area too. So they powered, all students are powering through, but UNC, of course, is predominant in our area. So I appreciate those sentiments. Let's see. I'm going on to, Randy and then Jackie, go ahead.
The second announcement I was going to make is, well, it's actually the first, but Climate Reality Orange County on Saturday morning for our monthly presentations. Jen Weiss from Duke's Nicholas School of the Environment is going to be presenting on how Green Bank can drive the North Carolina clean energy economy. So I will, let me see, I can't share the link in a chat, but I can post the link on Facebook. And if anybody wants to attend, Climate Reality Orange County chapter Facebook site also has the link.
Great. Thank you, Randy. Thanks. Jackie, is your hand, is that new? Okay.
Meetings, the comprehensive plan task force, Carrboro Connects will be meeting Thursday at 5:30, and those meetings are open to everybody, and you can go to Carrboro Connects and see what they're doing, which we encourage you to.
Great. Thank you for that. Susan.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually going to mention what Jackie had said, but I do have one quick question. Has the decision been made yet when the advisory board and town council meetings will be in person?
Yeah, not yet, although I think, and Joy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're looking at September because we won't know anything definitively until June, until the governor modifies whatever he modifies. And just in talking with staff about the logistics of just going back into person and moving everything around and all that kind of stuff, I think we've talked about, as long as we have the authority to do it through June, to stay in online meetings through June. Is that, Kat, is that your understanding, Julie?
That is.
Yeah. And then transitioning over the summer, and then in terms of remote policies and everything, whoever the new manager is, they'll be kind of, I guess, working with Julie and HR on that. So that's my understanding. So
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Randy, is your hand still up, or is that from earlier? Is that up again?
Oh, I'm
From earlier? Okay, great. So Mary, public comment. Do we have any members of the public here to talk about anything not on the agenda?
I don't think so. Hold on. No,
Okay, all right, great, thank you. So then we're ready to move on.
we don't. Yeah, I'm texting with Kathy, so no, we don't
Okay.
have one.
Awesome, thank you. And so we're ready for the consent agenda then, Julie.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. You have 5 items on your consent agenda this evening. The first item is approval of the minutes from the April 27th meeting with amendments from Councilmember Siles, Romaine, and Lavelle. The second item is a request to set a public hearing on text amendments to the land use ordinance for compliance with North Carolina General Statute Chapter 160D. Your third item is to request to approve a resolution authorizing the town manager to award a contract for commissioning agent services for the 203 project. Your fourth item is authorization to donate $500 to the Carrboro High School Class of 2021 mural project. And your fifth item is authorization to expend up to $250 to support the cost of a DJ during the Town of Carrboro Pride Food Truck Rodeo.
All right, thank you. I'd like to pull number 5 just to talk to the council about it quickly. Is there a motion for 1 through 4? Well, Barbara, I'm sorry, your hand's up.
Yeah, I'm not pulling anything. Motion to move items 1 through 4.
Awesome, thank you. Is there a second by Sammy? All in favor, say aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Me, aye. Randy?
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Great. Just real quick, y'all, this item about the food truck rodeo, this is a pride kind of event we're trying to organize in conjunction with Chapel Hill with their LGBTQ group, just to have a couple of events throughout that month to recognize pride. And we thought, I explained to them how the one that Randy had done and for Earth Day, how well it had gone off and everything. And so Randy's agreed to kind of help organize that. And in that spirit, if we had music, that's what the 250 is for a DJ. In this item, I noticed it says 250 in one place, it says 500 in one place, probably just because it was copied off of the Carrboro one or something. But Randy, one item you had talked about was a table that an artist did for Earth Day. And so if we are able to get this scheduled, which it looks like we'll be able to, the ask I would like to make is to authorize us up to 500 in case we're able to do both of those things as part of this food truck rodeo. So Randy, do you want to add on to that?
I'll just add that, just like with the Earth Day event, there were organizations, nonprofits that wanted to table. And so we're hoping that this event, folks will want to have their tables. The AIDS Action Network, for example, and should we move forth with having a pride themed table, picnic table, donated and artwork done. Last time it ran closer to I want to say 500 just for that. Let's talk about it so that we can have any costs above what you're recommending being augmented and crowdsourced by the folks the nonprofits.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Understand very transparently that we don't know what the artist cost would be at this time.
Right. And we're pretty sure that it's going to be approved by the Special Events Committee, but that's kind of going through that, and we're pretty sure it's going to be able to be run. But anyway, that's why we're asking for authorization up to 500, depending on how those two come through. So would you like to move that then, Randy?
Yes, I'll move the item.
Okay, awesome. Second by anyone? Damon? All right. All in favor, say aye. Susan?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Damon?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Randy? Great. Thanks, y'all. All right, and so now we're ready for our first item. And I should mention to the public who's watching that Julie is our acting town manager tonight. Our town manager's on vacation this week. He's out of town, and so Julie, thank you for pinch hitting tonight. We appreciate it, and all week for acting as town manager. So
No problem. Okay, so tonight under other matters, you all have 4 items. Our first item is an update on the bike share and consideration of town code amendments relating to bike share, e-bikes, e-scooters, and other micro-mobility devices and bikeways. And we will have Zach, our transportation planner, do the staff report.
All right, good evening, everyone. Give me one moment. I'll get my slides up.
thank you.
Congratulations, Zach.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I figured word would make its way around eventually. Can everyone see that? Great. So tonight I'll be talking a bit about kind of the current status of our bike share, the conversations we've been having, as well as some related town code amendments. Starting out, a little bit of a timeline, some things that have happened. We had back in, I think, October or so with the transportation update, there was some more general information about bike share that was provided. In November of last year, Gotcha, which is the current bike share operator for UNC, was acquired by another company called Bolt. So then in the beginning of the new year, staff from Carrboro, Chapel Hill, and UNC all began kind of renewed conversations with Bolt. Now that there's different leadership, we have to kind of have some of the same conversations again. In February, we started talking about potential options for a pilot program. Some of these things were mentioned last month in April. Those 2 options being looking at an expansion of the existing pedal bike system, not an expansion so much as relocating some of the hubs that are underused. In our case, the one that's there at the end of the lib of Cotton, see if we can find another location where it might get some more use. And then as well as a potential sort of short-term e-bike pilot, which would run through the end of the current contract, which is May of 2022. That brings us to today. To now in the summer, we'll continue to kind of review some of these final details regarding any potential pilot program for e-bikes. A big milestone kind of later this year, UNC will be looking to develop an RFP to select a bike share provider, and part of that will be this RFP will be bike share for all of us. It won't just be limited to the campus area, so that any system that is developed, the bikes can be used throughout. And finally, the end of the current bike share contract is May of 22. I don't necessarily have a timeline for when any new bike share might start up. That would be dependent on that RFP process. I don't know if the university wants it to start as soon as the old one ends, or if they're looking to wait until kind of the beginning of the fall semester. I can provide that information once we find out more. So why are we looking at some of these town code amendments? A lot of these are related to micro-mobility or all of these other kind of transportation devices, for lack of a better word. That does include e-bikes and e-scooters, and some of the other weird devices you've seen out there. I've seen a guy who has that like electric unicycle. I've seen the hoverboard. I've seen the electric skateboard, all sorts of things. So really, what we're going to be doing, mostly a lot of the rules that apply to bicycles will also apply to all of these. So really the types of amendments that we're looking at is really defining out a lot of these micro-mobility devices, defining bike share, or more broadly speaking, what's often called a shared active transportation system. So whether it's bikes or scooters, if it's operated by an app where there's a company that sort of facilitates this decentralized system, that's what those fall under. Then defining where they're allowed to operate, generally in the same way as bikes. We'd like to see them in bike lanes and on greenways and not really on sidewalks. And then, like I mentioned, making sure that the regulations that apply to bicycles also apply to these other devices. but then also creating this framework for bike share or other micromobility, really establishing what the bike share provider, if it's a private company, like kind of what we're talking through now, what their responsibilities are in terms of making sure bikes or scooters don't end up in places we don't want them, whether that's private property or blocking the sidewalk. So with that, there are two actions tonight. Is we're looking to adopt some proposed town code amendments that were in your packet, but then also to authorize staff to enter into further negotiations with the bike share provider that is Bolt. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for that, Zach. Let's go to Jackie first and then Damon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And Zach, I really appreciate all the work you've done on this. I just want to reiterate for the public that the last time this came before us, we were really concerned that, well, we didn't want to experience what Raleigh and Asheville had experienced with bikes just being left everywhere and people kind of running people off the sidewalks and all of that. I'm excited about this. I can, I don't have a car and I can see this as something I would use. But could you, just kind of go over for us again how we would make sure that they weren't clogging up the sidewalks and being left haphazardly and, kind of interfering with pedestrians as they were trying to walk on sidewalks?
I think there's 2 points to that. One is, in addition to things we have in the town code, I know as we're crafting a contract with them, those are things that will be in the contract with them, so they'll know they're responsible for their devices, but then also to having a kind of more of a working relationship with them, because they have, at least what I know of the current provider, Gotcha, has local staff that handle those sorts of issues. So if the bikes were to end up in some place where someone couldn't get to them, they have local people who can come and kind of take care of that.
So it's not
beyond
just
that,
like,
I think we need.
I'm sorry. I know in Raleigh a couple years ago, my nephew and his then fiance used to make extra money by running around Raleigh, picking them up and delivering them. So this isn't just random people picking them up. It would be people that it's their job to go and pick them up, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding of how it would work.
Great. And then as far as not running over pedestrians on the sidewalks.
Yeah, as far as that goes, say, maybe you could kind of describe just common courtesy. There's concerns of the people who are on whatever these devices are. I think part of that is we can work with the provider to kind of put some of that safety information where you should be riding as part of the either the login information for this app or the system, so that if you're going to use one of these, you're getting a notice that says, please don't ride on sidewalks, or if you're going to ride on sidewalks, be courteous and yield to pedestrians, something along those lines.
And would we be able to ticket people who broke those rules? I know there've been people run over in Raleigh and Asheville, so we would be people could be held accountable for their actions.
Yeah, so I think the way we have the town code amendments set up, they restrict the micromobility or any device that has an electric assist from riding on sidewalks. So that would be set up in the town code that way.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jackie. Damon and then Susan.
Thanks, Lydia. Zach, thanks for the short presentation. I appreciate the work you've put into this since the last time this came to us. As Jackie said, we sent this back to you a previous time and to do a little bit of more tweaking. My question is on the same topic as Jackie's question, primarily about the responsibility of the vendors to keep the devices off of pedestrian paths. And I understand that what I understand from your answer to Jackie's question, Zach, is that sort of coming up with an approach for dealing with that issue will be left to this sort of contract negotiation stage with the vendor, between the town and the vendor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's really nothing, and as I read the ordinance language the draft ordinance language here, there's really nothing in the ordinance language other than saying that these companies are responsible for doing this, right? That sort of really, it doesn't get any more particular than that. I guess the reason I raised this as an issue, Jackie sort of described the problem well, and it's certainly my familiarity was more with in downtown Durham, is that it's happening a lot where these scooters, for example, are being left in the middle of sidewalks and other places where it's making the sidewalks inaccessible. And there's not really a clear way to solve the problem. You can report, the problem can be reported to the vendor, can be reported to the city, but the city just says you have to report it to the vendor. I mean, there's no clear solution that the city or the vendors have identified. So the city hasn't identified for holding the vendors accountable to their responsibility under the ordinance language. So I feel a little stuck. I certainly want us to be promoting the use of these devices and offering people more and more options for other kinds of transportation. But I also want us to, we already have an issue in Carrboro of making sure that our sidewalks are accessible, and adding this layer of obstacle feels challenging to me. So is there more that you can share about what you see as the town's approach to negotiating this responsibility with the vendors that's, for example, different than what City of Durham currently has in place? Because it's not working for the City of Durham, and I think even the City of Durham recognizes that it's not working for them, but they haven't figured out what to do.
Right.
Can you tell us a little more about that? And then I have a follow-up question as well after that.
Yeah, I'll distinguish between the situation in Durham, which for those who aren't familiar, it's a sort of permitting system where any company that operates a scooter share or bike share can essentially apply for a permit to operate within the city. And so there are a couple of different companies that are operating at the same time. That's not really the system we're talking about here. We're going through a contracting system with one vendor. And I think there's part of the opportunity to operate on UNC, where UNC has tended to be very protective of the bike share environment on campus, so that as part of that, if someone wants to, that opportunity to serve UNC in the surrounding areas, part of that contract development will be some better guidance as to how exactly they will handle where scooters or bikes are being placed, because UNC and Chapel Hill will have the exact same sorts of issues.
Do you imagine the contract having teeth in it? So, for example, if there is language in the contract that specifies how the single selected vendor will meet its obligations under our ordinance, in the Carrboro's ordinance, which says, kind of generally speaking, that the company is responsible for keeping these devices out of pedestrians' paths. I think the City of Durham's ordinance has some kind of penalty. It's quite clear about assessing a penalty when an incident is happening, that kind of thing. Ours doesn't do that here. But it sounds like we're going to be relying on UNC and Chapel Hill and Carrboro, or I guess primarily UNC, to be negotiating a contract that can be enforced more easily than what's happening in Durham.
Yeah, I don't think we've gotten quite to that stage yet in determining the sort of teeth behind those provisions in the contract, but that's something we can look at more closely as it gets developed.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to flag that as something to be sure to pay close attention to. Second question is related to an email that we got today from Tamara Sanders about consistency in the language between two sections, one relating to, one is a section on bike paths, one's a section on sidewalks, right? And just being consistent about the responsibility of both pedestrians and cyclists in terms of expectations about passing and signaling. The first section, the one that's specific to bike paths, doesn't make clear. It makes clear that pedestrians are expected to walk to the right, but it doesn't specify, as the sidewalk section does, that that cyclists have an expectation to be passing on the left, for example? Is it just, I think she was suggesting that there's room for more consistency in the language between those two sections, so that all of these paths are treated essentially the same. The expectations are uniform, in other words, for all the users of those paths.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm not sure. Kind of a procedural question from me is I don't know if we can make that change now or if we would need to bring back something a little different. But I see what you're getting at. Be consistent in terms of if it's going to be on the left, say on the left, or if it's just, because I think one of them says explicitly on the left and the other just says give an audible signal when you're passing. And I thought about that after I saw it, and I'm somewhat hesitant to say you have to pass on the left just because some situations, depending on volumes of traffic, people are walking on both sides at the same time. And somehow, you can envision in the situation where as a cyclist, you're kind of passing in the middle.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to flag that since we got that message from Tamara, but thanks for that as well.
Thanks, Damon. Let me just quickly say two things before I go to Susan and then Randy. So Brady, we got some suggested language, small revisions to two parts of some of the town code amendments that we're reviewing and voting on tonight. And I'm not sure if you got to see that or not, Brady, but also it sounds like Zach liked part of it, but then one part of it, he wasn't quite, I see your point about that one too, Zach. So the question for you, Brady, would be if we can we adopt this town code amendment tonight with revisions that we received today that we're now discussing, or is there some kind of notice that we need to have it again before we could adopt it?
Yeah, and I mean, Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe any amendments to the town code as opposed to like the zoning ordinance, it doesn't require that same notice requirements.
Okay.
So I believe y'all are free to go and do so, especially if it's going to add some more clarity to what Zach and Damon sort of pointed out with the updated language.
Okay.
So, and Kathy, unless I'm wrong on that, I believe you all are fine to go and adopt it, even with the small revisions.
Okay. So Kathy, if that's different, let us know. But I think before we have a motion and a second on this in a little bit, maybe we can pull up that email so we understand exactly what the two tweaks are, and then the one that is slightly different based on Zach's comment, or Zach can pull it up or whatever. But just let's look at that in just a few minutes. But have that on the back burner there. Let's see. Let's go Susan and then Randy and then back to me with a comment. So, Susan.
Okay, thank you, Lydia, and thank you for your presentation, Zach. I had just a couple of questions. Well, 3 questions. I think they're all pretty fast. I read the code, and riders of e-scooters and e-bikes must be at least 16 years of age. It doesn't say, unless I missed it, it doesn't say if they're required to have a driver's license, and I was curious if they are, in order to ride a.
That's a good question. I don't believe they are. There's a lot of for smaller. I think it has to do with the motor size. So like e-bikes, you don't have to have a driver's license to ride an e-bike. And I think the scooters kind of fall under the same classification. I can double check that though.
Yeah, and I wondered when you find out if that would be something that should be included in the code. The other question I had was, how do you ensure that somebody is 16 or over? Say if they're using the bike share program. I mean, if they needed to show proof with a driver's license, I would get that, but I'm not sure I'm not sure that's part of the process. So how is that proof shown?
Yeah, it's more of so the functional practice of some of these bike share or scooter companies is they will only let people who are 18 or over use their services for liability purposes. So it might be that's what they use. They ask people to input their driver's license number, and that at the very least you're getting people who are over 16. As far as it's generally going to be they'd be a waiver you would sign just like with anything else, indicating I agree to all their terms and conditions. I agree that I'm over 18 years old, things of that nature. I don't necessarily think it would stop someone who's 16 and has a driver's license from using the system, but they're not going to market it to folks who are under 18.
Mhm. Fair enough. I would just be more concerned about somebody who's 11 or 12 and looks 16 and is getting on an e-bike. Another question I have has to do with helmets, Zach. And I'm curious if I didn't see anything about this in town code either, and I may have missed it, but are helmets required for e-bikes, e-scooters in Carrboro?
They're not required for bikes now. They're required for riders who are, I believe, the age of 16 and under. So I think we'd apply that consistently to e-scooters and e-bikes as well. So there's not if you're 16 or over, there's no helmet requirement. And I think that's been something I've seen some other conversations with bike share and scooter share. It's really hard to figure out a way to get people to have helmets because no one's just carrying a helmet around with them to use when they use the bike share. So yeah, that's a good question. It's something we'll look at a little more.
That would be great. And to follow up on that, Zach, I'm curious if bike share has considered making helmets available when people come to, get their, sign a waiver or whatever. But I don't know if they could be made available when people are picking up their e-bike or e-scooter, should they need one.
I know when these conversations first started, there was some talk of trying to figure that out. I think COVID kind of put a little damper on that just because that's something else that someone's touching and putting on. We can certainly look into it again, though.
Okay. My last question, Zach, is I don't even know if an electric wheelchair is considered a micro mobility device. I didn't see it in the categories, but I have seen on multiple occasions somebody who's riding an electric wheelchair near the roundabout, and I'm always scared to death. He rides, his wheelchair is sort of built so that he's leaning quite far back in the wheelchair, and I just always worry about his visibility. And this question is to say, I don't even know if there's regulations in terms of the wheelchairs. It's okay to be in the street, or is it, my sense is it would be safer to be in a sidewalk, but is the street still fine? And should there be at least some kind of flag or something creating more visibility, because I always worry about him.
Yeah, so I'd have to go look. I know there's a separate definition for, I think it's mobility scooter or motorized wheelchair. And if you look in the attachment under section 6, there's a part where it clearly calls out a motorized wheelchair as being something focused on conveying someone who has limited mobility. So different from all these other micro mobility devices that we're talking about. As far as where they can ride, I've heard different things from different people. Some folks prefer riding in the sidewalk. Some folks don't mind riding in the bike lane. I don't think there's a specific, you have to ride here or there when it comes to those.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen some folks who do have kind of, as you described, flags for better visibility. I don't know if there's any, it might be a state level, but I would have to look into that and see if there is anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Zach.
Great. Thanks, Susan. Randy, and then me, and then back to Jackie.
Okay, thank you, Susan. You kind of paved the way for me. I had similar questions. But first, I want to go back to something Damon said, and I kind of want to ask Damon, but also ask Zach. If Damon, you're suggesting in some way that the ordinance, the attachment A, somehow reflect some very specific safety interests that we have in Carrboro. Is that what you're suggesting? Because the safety items that are listed in attachment A are not specific enough to what you and Jackie had underscored.
Well, I wasn't suggesting anything. I'm not totally sure I understand your question, Annie, but wasn't suggesting anything about safety items. I was suggesting that Durham has been having a difficult experience with some of the vendors who are providing these devices in their downtown, with them just getting left and not retrieved. So they're kind of in the way of people trying to walk or otherwise use the sidewalk. I don't have a suggestion for how to solve that problem. I just wanted to flag that for Zach and staff so that when they're having these future discussions with whoever this single vendor is going to be for our area, that the responsibility of the vendor to address this issue is a real one. And we don't end up in the same situation as Durham has.
I was just wondering, Zach, and council, if the ordinance, if attachment A should actually underscore, a concern for the devices being left. So I'm just asking that in terms of whether or not the ordinance can reflect that. That's number one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the ordinance language as it's drafted now does lay that responsibility at the feet of the vendor. I think what I was getting at is just wanting to make sure that it was flagged for Zach that when there's a contract in place, that responsibility is going to need to be articulated in a meaningful way, right? And then there will have to be process and penalties, et cetera, for non-compliance.
Right. Okay. So then the other 2 points that I wanted to raise, getting to what Susan was saying about helmets, what I had the question about whether or not helmets would be provided by the share system, because in other cities that I've visited and where I've used equipment, that's part of the registration to lease the equipment. And I'm putting that out there. If you look at item 6, it said shared active transportation system shall provide safety information and inform users of the need to wear helmets while operating their shared devices. So it is an expectation that they're going to wear helmets. And that's that. Since this is for people 18 and older who are leasing this equipment, it goes with the expectation. I don't know how much we have to actually spell out, but it does say will wear helmets while operating the shared devices. That doesn't seem like it's an if. It seems like it's clear. Am I misreading that, Zach?
So I think it operates a lot like our current regulations for helmets on bikes, is that yes, it's a good thing to wear a helmet, but we're not going to require people to wear them. I think the helmet interest from a shared active transportation system is more one of safety and protection. I think that's something we would work through in the contract in terms of is there an easy and effective way for them to provide helmets for users of the system? I don't really know the answer to that question, but that's something we'll look in as we're developing the contract.
Yeah. Lastly, I was also really glad to see that the recommendation Tamara made, and I guess I appreciate what you're saying about, there's sometimes riders need to ride in between, but if the community understands what the rules of the road are, that you pass on the left, then people would understand you can't walk to. You can't split the traffic, so to speak. And I think it makes a lot of sense to me from a long-term view to set an expectation within the community. And that's why I really appreciated Tamara's point, because an audible signal plus passing on the left, that's how we had a bike in New York. And I'm talking 45 years ago. If you want to save your ass, that's what you do. And so I'm just thinking, I don't mean to be crude, but it's just a matter of when people understand that that's the expectation, then the pedestrians as well as the folks using the equipment understand that that's what the rules are. And I think we have to, and I'm glad this point was raised, because I think we need to start to educate the community if we're moving towards, vehicles that are not cars, that there's a new set of rules that we need to appreciate. And that's why I really value when the cyclists and the cycling community do little mini courses with the children, and then I see them out there using their hand signals, because that means that we're educating community rather than it being haphazard. So I would just set the expectation and really start to broadcast that.
All right, thanks, Randy. I have 3 comments, and I'll head on back to Jackie. First one, Zach, when when we talk about Durham and some other communities that use bike share, like say Bird, the model is you just kind of do drop it wherever you do, and then it's picked up, right? Whatever we get into with UNC, are they going to use, I think I heard you mention like the docking station we have that's underutilized. Are there going to be places where the students will be required, or the users will be required to return the bikes to, or will it be like a Bird situation where you just are, you can drop it wherever you want?
So it's a little bit in between. So there's going to be some physical infrastructure. It might just be like some basic plastic delineators and some paint that's a bike share hub of some. And I think for flexibility's sake, they can do sort of a geofenced area around that, so you don't have to have the bike exactly within the hub, so that if you have a situation or you have one hub that has a bunch of bikes, they'll kind of end up being clustered in the general vicinity. There are some options for ending a trip outside of a hub. I think like the current system, you can basically take a trip. You can pause the trip if you wanted to go make a stop, pick up some things, and then go back. So you're just using one bike and you're not leaving it. You come out of the store and the bike's gone. You don't want to run into that. I think I would have to look to see how the current system operates. I think you may also be able to end a trip outside of a hub, but there's an additional fee associated with that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just was thinking of the difference between the two, because I know there's one a bike share at Central where they have to bring them back to the spot where they got it. Secondly, with regard to Susan's comment about whether folks are required to have a driver's license, if they're 16 or older or using these various type of motorized vehicles. It would be my view that we would not want to require that, because I think one of the reasons people use those kind of vehicles sometimes is because they're not able to get a driver's license for whatever reason. It could be a variety of reasons. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there, that it's that's the way some people have to use to get around because they can't have a driver's license. And then with this language about passing on the right, I was looking at Tamara's email, and the one that is about pedestrians seems very clear. Bicyclists shall pass only on the left and only after giving an audible signal to such pedestrians. I mean, that's kind of I don't know. But the other one, actually, as I look at that, it's a little bit odd. But the other one, I can see instances where bicyclists would pass other bicyclists on the right. When we have a couple of different lanes and someone's going left and someone's going right. I mean, it can be a little confusing. And also just passing pedestrians. I guess that's if they're on the sidewalk or something, because the pedestrians should be on the other side anyway. I don't know. I don't know how we want to consider any changes we might make to what's already been proposed to us from Zach. So I just wanted to throw that out to the group that we might want to think through those 2 suggested changes. Let's go back to Jackie, and then Randy, and then Sammy. Sorry, I just saw your hand. So.
Thank you, Lydia. And Susan, I really appreciate your comments and the need to make sure that people are of age, but I totally agree with Lydia about not having a license. A lot of people now, for a lot of different reasons, don't have a license. And as we're trying to encourage people to use alternative transportation, there are going to be fewer and fewer And then, of course, I wouldn't want us to run into the same problems that we're seeing with voter ID. You know, like who doesn't have it? But I appreciate where that's coming from.
Yeah.
My concern is that I have seen people, and it makes perfect sense, using these devices for bar hopping. And you hop into one too many bars and you're not so good at hopping anymore. So I'm kind of wondering, will our DWI laws apply to these vehicles as well? Because that's just a tragedy waiting to happen, I think.
Thank you, Jackie.
So to my knowledge, the DWI laws apply to vehicles, and since bicycles are included as vehicles, I would need to see how these definitions are classified. So e-bike says a bicycle, and I think every other one says a vehicle. That might be more a question for Brady. I'm not certain how that would apply.
I want to have that on our radar screen because I want us kind of want us to protect people from their own foolish actions.
Yeah, it's a good question, Jackie. I know that the DUI laws do apply to bicycles, but I'm kind of with Zach. It's going to have to sort of depend on the definition. But since this has been around for 3+ years, I'm sure there's an answer to that. So our office can look into that as well.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Let's see. Randy and then Sammy.
Nope, I just needed to take my hand down. Thanks again.
Okay. All right, great. Sammy.
Thank you, Zach, for all your work on this. Glad we have something to approve tonight. Just a response to this question of helmets and section 6, number 6, I think it is. It says that the shared transportation system shall provide safety information and inform users of the need to wear helmets while operating their shared devices. But you're saying that it's not required currently. So maybe that language should be changed because they don't need to. Maybe it should be that inform them that they should is different because it needed is a requirement, and by town code, it's not currently required. The other question I had was the pilot that we're potentially going to go into. In the language, the draft language that we're considering tonight, you are asking the shared active transportation system to provide the town with anonymized data in a certain format. In this pilot, will we be requiring them to provide that data? And the whole point of a pilot is to kind of learn from it. Is that something you'd be able to do?
Yeah, so I'll break it into the two different ones I kind of talked about. The expanding the existing pedal bikes, UNC is getting that data now. So if we were just to expand kind of that existing system, we can work with them to get the data. As far as any e-bike pilot, I think it should be providable as well.
Okay, great. And then in regard to the RFP that UNC is doing, to what degree are the towns involved in that process? The reason I raised the question is the current bike share program really just kind of ends at the end of Live a Cut, and I think it may be in part because we weren't involved in that process to the same degree that I would hope we could. I envision if we go into such a collaboration, we would have a lot more hubs or whatever access to the service throughout town, and it wouldn't just be a means for students to go to the edge of town to then access UNC.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with how old the existing contract is, but it sure seems like it was something that UNC did looking at all of their properties. So we were, I guess, fortunate enough that UNC had that one property there at the Live a Cotton, so that we ended up with a bike share hub. But it didn't really look like it was particularly linked with the town, with the idea of creating one unified system. I think that's what really, when we go into this RFP process, we want to make sure we do.
Okay, so will the council have an opportunity to weigh in on that process?
I'm not sure how that process is going to develop. Once I have some more information, I'm sure we'll have something to bring back to you guys.
Could you share with whoever you're negotiating with that there is that interest on our part? I'm assuming I'm speaking for everyone here.
I can do that.
Thank you. Thanks, Zach. Those are all my questions.
All right. So thanks, everyone. I just wanted to revisit this question of the language. And I don't know, Mary, if
I have a question whenever you're going to allow me.
Yeah. I see you up there now. I'm sorry. And now I see Randy's again, too. I'm sorry. Let's go to Barbara. And then in the meanwhile, Mary, if you can make sure I have permission, I'll pull up that other language after we go to Barbara. And then I see Randy's is up again, too. So go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you, Mayor Lavelle. So, Zach, thank you for the presentation, and my colleagues for the very thoughtful questions around safety and vendor responsibility, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about vendor responsibility, because bringing online the micro mobility devices, with the bikes, our bikes already in play, and pedestrians and stuff. So I think it might get interesting, as far as everybody, kind of navigating like the bike lane, the sidewalk, and all that. So looking forward to hearing more from you, Zach, whenever you have more information. So of course, my question is about access and who has access to the devices and how they get access. I see that in section 6, number 5, which says, the shared active transportation system shall provide a method by which people can access the system without needing a smartphone or a bank account. And so, of course, we know that's key for folks who don't have that. Everybody thinks everybody's got this, everybody's got that. Well, actually, no, they don't. And so, I am glad to see that in here, and was just wondering if you had any more information on what that process would look like, as folks without access to smartphone or bank account. Do you have any more information about how they might access using the system?
So somewhat only limited right now from what I've heard from Gotcha. And we've heard some similar things from Vogel. We need to renew these conversations, is that they've worked with other municipalities so folks who don't have a bank account or don't have a smartphone are basically able to go to, a municipal office. They have their cash and they get kind of a physical, almost debit card, or it's some kind of card that you can swipe or use to activate the bikes without having to have a credit card or a bank account.
Perfect. And that's coming. I just have to work out the logistics and all that. It'll come online.
Yeah, it's something they've sounded supportive of, but again, that's something we'll make sure to work into the contract.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Zach.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Randy, are you back up again?
Yeah, I want to come behind and say that, when Sammy mentioned the exact same point that I had made before about number 6 with helmets, need to wear helmets, I'm supporting the need to wear helmets. And the reason is that in Carrboro, even though in Carrboro you don't have to wear a helmet, these electric bikes, some of them go up to 28 miles per hour. And the reason the bike share folks want this in there is their liability. I mean, that's the reason why when I've been in different cities and I've rented equipment like this, they provide the helmet, because they do not want the liability of somebody going out there without them saying, we have given you a helmet, you're supposed to wear it. So I think we need to have more conversation about this, because if some of these vehicles can go 20 to 28 miles per hour, we need to be on the side of ensuring that we are going to follow through with what we know a share company would have to do to be sure that they weren't sued for not providing helmets.
Thanks, Randy. Zach, I guess I was thinking that these bike share programs would be regular bikes. Are they electric bikes?
So it's kind of confusing with some of the pilots that we've been talking about. One of the short-term pilots would just use the existing pedal bikes. The other one would be an e-bike. And a little bit of a distinction is that generally the e-bikes that are used in a bike share system are probably going to top out at about 20 or 18 miles an hour, but still similar concerns. It's a pretty high speed for a bike. You'd have to be pretty athletic to get up to that speed on your own.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. All right, so let me. I wanted to just quickly share this language here. Just give me half a second here. Let me put this up. So this is what Tamara suggested to us that a few of us liked. Zach, I understood your question or your point about. So there were two spots on an image that she also emailed to us. I've got that image here too that I can show you exactly where this is. Her suggestion one on a bike path when passing pedestrians or another bicyclist from the rear, bicyclist shall pass only on the left and only after giving an audible signal. And then for number two, bicyclists shall pass only on the left and only after giving an audible signal. And I was wondering if one way to kind of your concern, Zach, was to take shall pass only after giving an audible signal, like taking on the left off of this suggested language. And here I'll show folks. I mean, we all have it, but this is the one. This is what we were looking at. So just let me show this real quick. So these are the two spots. So because this one did not say anything on the left to begin with. This one did say on the left to begin with, because this one up here is about bike paths. This one down here is about sidewalks. So that's some of the distinction as I see it. Are you all able to see that right now?
No.
You weren't. Okay, I didn't have it. I'm sorry. I forgot. I didn't share it exactly. Let me.
I thought Zach had an interesting reply that I thought was thoughtful about why part of that made sense and why another part maybe.
Right. And that's exactly what I just went over. So let me just show it to you again real quick. I'm sorry. I thought I had it up and I thought I was showing it to you exactly his point. Because I want us to get through this. Hang on. Okay, can you folks see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this one up here where she gave us some revised language and she added in on the left on this. And Zach said, no, we don't need to add in on the left here because this one up here was dealing with bike paths.
Right.
So that was the one I think Zach was suggesting, taking out the on the left language. Down here, it did have on the left because it's dealing with sidewalks, okay? And so when we look at the language that she suggested, which I'm gonna stop my share here now on this. When we look at the language that she suggested, so up here, I'm saying take out on the left. So on a bike path, when passing, yada, yada, bicycle shall pass only after giving an audible signal. And then this one here I thought was fine. So I don't know, Zach, if you want to comment on my explanation or interpretation of what you said.
Yeah, you pretty much captured kind of my thinking there. There's kind of a distinction between being on a sidewalk when you kind of have just enough room to pass someone and you're going to want to be really clear and you're going to want to always pass on an expected side so that you're not creating unnecessary conflicts or putting someone closer to the road than they need to be. And I think the bike path distinction is why I was comfortable with that first part not having on the left, because there tends to be a little more room to maneuver and there tends to be more folks who are out and about. But
right.
I could be comfortable with on the left as well. It makes sense kind of what Council Member Haven O'Donnell described about being consistent and having rules that everyone understands.
Okay. All right, so folks, this is the distinction here of 1 and 2, what Tamara suggested, which I think does flow a little better. And then this is what Zach said, we could or could not take off. It's up to us. So let's hear y'all's pleasure on that. along with a motion. Randy, can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm going to say I'd like to leave it in, and I'm going to give you the example of Martin Luther King Park and cycling in Martin Luther King Park around pedestrians. And if you have an audible signal and you don't go to the left, you know, somebody could misinterpret what you're going to do, and because it's small, and that's just a very small example. But that's the reason I like Tamara's language, and I like the consistency, and I would like to leave it in. And with that, I'd make a motion to move the attachment and the.
Okay, so you're making the motion to
include audible signal and pass on the left, and to move the item.
Second.
Okay, all right. So
that include the authorization to staff to continue their negotiations.
Yes. I thought that. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the motion and second is to adopt what was presented to us with those two changes from Tamara, and then, as Damon said, to continue the negotiations with the contract. So that's what the current motion and second are. Sammy?
Yeah, just in terms of this language on number 6 and the language of need and the conflict that it has with our ordinance, I will vote for this tonight, but only with an understanding that need language there is in regard to the expectation that we have of the company to require that. That's not because we as a town require it.
I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, Barbara. Yeah.
Sammy, can you clarify that a little bit more? I might have missed something. You said require. Are you talking about like safety equipment, helmet, or
safety equipment, helmet? As Zach pointed out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear you on that, Sammy. Okay. Any other comments from anyone about that item? If not, we'll go ahead and vote then. All in favor, say aye. Susan?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
And Damon?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you, Zach.
Sorry, Lydia. One more point that I think merits our consideration and some direction to Zach in terms of this question about requiring helmets. There are a lot of valuable questions we raised, like speed of these vehicles, you know, how it works in other places where they require. I assume a lot of people, at least as I've experienced it in cities, it's the availability of it. And I'm traveling, I don't carry a helmet, and I've actually never seen helmets available at these sites. So if we could get more clarity and not have this language like lock us into a certain kind of share program, but that's something for us to weigh in on at a later time as to whether we want to stick to that or not. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, thank you. Julie, you got that, and Zach did too, of course. But just, you know, kind of our questions, concerns about the requiring and the types and the how is it there? How do other places do it? And then that'll all, I guess, feed into this negotiation of this contract that we're having with the others. So.
Yep, I got it.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Zach. All right. So we're on to our next item then.
All right, so your second item tonight under other matters is an update on the crisis diversion facility. And I believe Chief ATAC will be coming over.
Kathy, are you bringing some other folks over too? Good evening again. Hello. Hello, everyone.
Yes, if you're in the audience for this item, if you'll just raise your hand, please. That way we can find you a little.
Should be Kate Van Hagen and Tony, and I wrote it down because he's got a long name, Marim Petrie. There's Kate.
Just seeing Kate, Chief.
Uh-oh. Okay.
There should be Tony Marampietri.
He was there earlier from what Kate said.
Yeah, he was definitely there.
Not seeing him now.
Kate, are you where you can kind of talk about it, or do we need Tony for it?
Yeah, we do need Tony for this, but I'm giving him. There he is.
There he is. He's reappeared.
So I can go ahead and get started if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So good evening, Mayor Lavelle and council members. I'm Kate Fenhagen. I'm the Criminal Justice Resource Director for Orange County. I want to thank Chief ATAC for inviting us to present to you tonight on the findings and recommendations by the Orange County Behavioral Health Task Force for a countywide crisis diversion facility, something that I think is a critical need in our community. The presentation before you tonight, though, is a summary of what was a full presentation and much longer presentation in front of the Board of County Commissioners. After some targeted presentations, one of which was to our law enforcement chiefs, which Chief ATAC was present for, our Justice Advisory Council, which he may have also been present for, and the full Behavioral Health Task Force. We've had a large number of medical professionals, behavioral health professionals, crisis responders, criminal justice stakeholders, and people with lived experience that have dedicated a lot of hours over many, many months to this planning process. But none more so than Tony Marampietri, who is the chair of the facility work group. Subcommittee of the Behavioral Health Task Force. He brings his experience as a project manager from his career at RTI. But more importantly, he also brings his experience as a NAMI member with a loved one impacted by our absolute failure to respond well to our community members who are in behavioral health crisis. So I am going to share my screen now so that Tony can start our presentation. And hopefully that is showing up for you all.
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Council members and Chief ATAC, thank you for the opportunity to go through this. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. It's about 20 minutes to go through the piece, and maybe we'll have time for some questions. But Kate introduced it. The next slide shows the topics that I'll be covering. Kate, if you'll advance it. I will go through a brief introduction, and then we'll look at current status, recommendations that we make, look at the potential benefits from those recommendations, and then look at related considerations and next steps, which give you some idea where we're at and where we're headed.
Excuse me just a minute. Excuse me just a minute, Anthony. Caitlin, it's not advancing. What we're seeing is just the PowerPoint. It's not in like presentation mode and not advancing. So.
Let's see.
I'm on page 3 when you get it going.
You might have it. Maybe you have it open twice, and one of them is.
Let's see if it moves it over here. Is that coming up?
No, it's still just the PowerPoint that's still on just page 1, and it's not yet in. It's not starting from. It's not in like the presentation mode.
May have to stop the screen share and then reshare it to see if that clears out this.
Yeah, good idea. Okay. It's on the full screen now, so go ahead and try to advance it to the next slide. Okay, now it's on the now it's on the topic slide. So thank you.
So again, I went through the topics we'll be talking about, and I'm on slide 3, Kate. So by introduction, let's start with a little bit of background. In 2015, the Board of County Commissioners passed a resolution entitled Stepping Up Initiative to Reduce the Number of People with Mental Illness in Jails. So it's sort of self-explanatory. In 2018, as planning for the new Orange County Detention Center was underway, Sheriff Blackwood raised the idea of including a diversion unit for law enforcement in that facility, There was a work group established, some North Carolina facilities were visited, but that work wasn't completed in time for implementation of the diversion unit. So that's not part of the new detention center. In 2019, in April, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and Orange County held a series of workshops. Actually, these were 2 one-day workshops that were held back to back. We refer to them as the SIM workshop. 32 local representatives who focus on the intersection between criminal justice and behavioral health were involved in that workshop. Its purpose was to identify gaps in the current system, the current crisis response system, and to put forth recommended actions. In November of 2019, a responsibility for addressing one of the high priority actions to come out of the workshop was handed to the to the Behavioral Health Task Force, which then appointed the subcommittee that's reporting to you today to carry it forward. This keeps evolving. So in December 2020, just a few months ago, the Governor's Task Force on Racial Equity and Criminal Justice reported its findings, and some of those recommendations overlap with the topic we're talking about today. So slide 4. So we mentioned the subcommittee. This is the subcommittee's composition. I'm the chair, as Kate said. Kate and Barbara Ann are really our 2 sponsors, or our sort of senior leadership representing both criminal justice and clinical services. And then we have pretty good representation of people who are involved with various stakeholders who are directly engaged in crisis response. Our mission was to formulate recommendations for Orange County Crisis Services that would facilitate diversion of individuals experiencing a behavioral health crisis from, and that means either mental health or substance use disorder, from either the emergency department or from the criminal justice system. So on slide 5, we summarize some of the gaps that were identified during the workshop. So the workshop used a sequential intercept mapping structure, which breaks the criminal justice process into various intercepts. And at each, there's an opportunity to respond better to people with behavioral health issues. So at intercept 0, we're talking about community-based crisis services. And some of the limitations there currently are there are exclusionary criteria, there are limited hours, there are long wait times and wait lists, and discharge planning is often limited or lacking completely. Intercept 1 involves law enforcement and emergency services. And if we're trying to divert people in crisis from either the emergency department or from jail, then the question is divert to where? We really have little or no alternatives to those 2 paths. Intercept 2 deals with the initial detention, initial court hearing. And what the workshop participants identified was insufficient clinical services at the detention center to deal with somebody with a behavioral health crisis. Screening tools are limited. Jail setting is not the best place to deal with a crisis, can exacerbate the problem. Then forward to intercept 3, which is jails and courts. At the time of the workshop back in 2019, some of these were more urgent. The new detention center has now addressed many of these gaps by providing more space for better programming and providing better space for people with mental illness or substance use disorder. But nevertheless, a behavioral health crisis center would interact with the jail to provide a complete set of services. There are other considerations that cut across multiple intercepts, such as access to medical assisted treatment, making sure we're leaning into other partnerships and we have true collaboration in the community, expanding peer support to promote recovery or transition to community services. So these were the gaps that were identified at the workshop. Go to slide 6. So we looked at that and we thought that was a great starting point. It was limited in 2 ways. That we wanted to go a little bit broader, that is not so narrowly focused on the criminal justice system, but look at crisis response services in the community generally, and also to dive a little bit deeper. I mean, the workshop participants did a great job, gave us a good starting point, but it's, a group of people working on one day to come up with gaps. So we took the time to go a little bit deeper and work with various stakeholders directly. So that's emergency medical services, law enforcement, hospital ED, the courts, the jail, the general public, other treatment providers. And we worked with these representatives to examine crisis situations that arise in Orange County and use those cases to further identify services and facility attributes that are currently absent and that if they existed would enhance our crisis response and would benefit the stakeholders who are engaging individuals on crisis on a daily basis. So it's really providing better outcomes for all. And this really helped us enrich our understanding of the gaps that exist in our current services. On slide 7, we'll move through a couple of those gaps. The stakeholder analysis showed that existing services in Orange County crisis system are limited by one or more of the following items. They do not provide no refusal intake for law enforcement or emergency services. They do not integrate well with criminal justice diversion programs. They don't meet all the needs due to extensive exclusionary criteria. They don't provide appropriate setting for behavioral health crisis. They don't offer the least restrictive, most conducive setting for resolving a crisis. They don't have the capacity to provide readily available clinical services, that is to respond quickly in criminal justice proceedings. They don't serve incarcerated individuals very well. Often there's a lack of peer support or case management. In fact, almost always is a lack of peer support and case management follow-up to facilitate moving forward in transitioning to community care. There's no immediate access to MAT, often long delays, do not provide adequate discharge planning. They fail to facilitate what we call a warm handoff to community treatment and social services. So the person isn't just discharged out the door and say, here's a list of people to call, but it actually has support in making that transition. Current services fail to facilitate holistic support, dealing with homelessness, dealing with employment issues that are part of the solution. Only Freedom House and UNC Emergency Department allow access by the general public on a 24/7, 365 basis. And those services are often at or over capacity. And there's limited services for indigent and uninsured. So if we move to the next slide, what we wanted to then look at, now that we know the problems, we know the limitations, what are the opportunities for improvement? So we did a best practices analysis, looked at the existing literature, talked to, did research on existing facilities. Currently, there's no national standards for crisis services such as exist for, let's say, EMS. There is an awfully large body of literature that points to evidence-based practices that can be adopted to Orange County. We found 2 references to be particularly useful, and that's the reference book that backs up the sequential intercept mapping or model, and National Guidelines on Crisis Care Best Practices Toolkit. This is a 2020 publication published by the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, and it's a guidebook, a toolkit to help communities like Orange County deal with improving their crisis system. There are many, many facilities we could look at. We talked to some, we did research on others. They vary widely. They're in large communities and small communities, they're in urban areas and rural areas. One of the things they do is they respond to the local conditions. Some of that research is summarized in Exhibit B in the slide deck. So some of the best practices are summarized on the right. Communities need to embrace the objective of diverting individuals in crisis away from emergency departments or jails. And they need to support that objective with dedicated facilities and programs. And those facilities need to serve anybody, anyone, anytime, anywhere, and to provide a calming environment to de-escalate a crisis. Network with community providers, it's a two-way street. The crisis center backs up community treatment providers, and community treatment providers receive the people coming out of the crisis care into community treatment. Provide warm handoffs to support with the support of case managers and peer support specialists. Make sure you're leaning into community-wide collaboration. Some of the best programs in the country really do a very good job of making sure, social services, homeless services, law enforcement, criminal justice are all working together to achieve common outcomes, common goals. And then provide holistic wraparound services, that is, deal with the whole person, and be prepared for continuous improvement. So on slide 9, let's look at where we're at and looking at the current situation. We have a multi-year series of actions from 2015 to 2020. We have the 2 gap analyses, the workshop, and then the stakeholder analysis to give us a pretty detailed understanding of what we have and what we don't have. And then we looked at the literature and current existing facilities to give us some guidance as to how we can make improvements. If you look at the graphic at the top, we've got a lot of very good services in Orange County. We've got a lot of good policies. But if you look at our current system through the lens of a behavioral health crisis, you begin to see these gaps that appear across pretty much every item. So in community treatment services, I like to think about when you call a doctor's office, the first thing you hear on the recording is if this is a medical emergency, dial 911. Well, if it's a behavioral health crisis and you call 911, you get law enforcement, you get emergency services, good people, good programs, CIT training. But nevertheless, if we're trying to divert people from the emergency department or jail, the question is divert to where? We don't provide a readily accessible alternative. If the person is into the emergency department, not the best environment for dealing with an crisis, and often not providing a very complete discharge planning. Person enters the criminal justice system, as noted earlier, there's limitations in program, limitations in screening tools, not the best environment for helping people in crisis get to a sort of better place. Facility-based services are absolutely needed and probably will be needed more in the future. But facility-based services, while providing a critical need, are not necessarily geared to immediate response. There are exclusionary criteria. There are capacity limitations. And then social services may not even know a crisis is going on, let alone be part of the solution set. And so the question about what do we do about the gaps that we have, going to the next slide, is we pick up on what the workshop suggested and add a lot of detail to it. That is, we recommend that Orange County enhance its crisis system by establishing a dedicated crisis diversion facility. That facility will provide clinical and criminal justice related services. And importantly, will network with existing programs and services. The facility will fill in the missing pieces in our current system. That is, it'll provide something that doesn't now exist, but it will build on current capacity and strengths. So it will not duplicate or replace any existing services or programs. In slide 11, we summarize the scope and function. So especially the stakeholder analysis really allowed us to get very detailed about what's missing, how a particular situation could be better handled if we just had A or B or C. And we refined that list over many iterations and came up with about 50 items that define 50 specifications that define the scope and function of the recommended facility. Those are listed in the slide deck in Exhibit C. I'm not going to take the time now to go through every one of those items, but in summary, they provide law enforcement and emergency medical services with a default no wrong door destination. That is the answer to the question, divert to where. They offer immediate clinical services for assessment, stabilization, and treatment for patients experiencing a behavioral health crisis, whether it's mental illness or substance use disorders. They provide behavioral health crisis services to walk-in patients. That is, providing assistance oftentimes before a crisis escalates to the level requiring emergency services. And they make referrals to treatment and social services with a warm handoff supported by a case manager and a peer specialist. That is, we're trying to facilitate transitioning individuals from crisis care to community-based treatment, getting them out of crisis care as quickly as the situation allows. We provide criminal justice stakeholders with more quick clinical assessment services and a better facility to provide the most appropriate care for justice-involved individuals. And finally, and this is sort of low-hanging fruit, once you've got the expertise in one place, you ought to be able to provide information to people who walk in or call about community treatment services that are currently available to Orange County residents for a wide variety of behavioral health problems, help people cut through the fog of obtaining behavioral health services that are so often experienced by individuals, families, and friends trying to get help. So the benefits in summary are we fill the gaps that we have identified. We support public safety and social justice reform efforts. We provide a no wrong door for emergency services and the general public. We align with criminal justice diversion and Orange County stepping up milestones. We provide a least restrictive setting for all sorts of in the cases that wind up at the crisis center than their alternative. We facilitate collaboration across a network of community providers and social services, which will multiply the facility's impact and desperately avoid that siloing effect where we're doing our own thing, but we're disconnected from homeless services or social services. And finally, we offer a real potential for reducing costs by reducing the burden on law enforcement, emergency services, hospital-based services, jail, and supporting the courts and diversion programs. So it really improves outcomes for all. The next slide sort of maps out who gets the benefits, primarily consumers and families. We estimate that approximately 300 episodes per month could be diverted to the crisis center. Law enforcement is next, and emergency medical services, answering that important question to divert to where. Then criminal justice stakeholders, by supporting criminal justice proceedings to facilitate diversions and enhancing services to those who are justice involved. And finally, the hospital-based emergency department and patient care by avoiding overcrowding them and also avoiding the high costs associated with those services. Finally, on slide 14, when you look at the literature, there's a comprehensive crisis system really involves a number of parts. This graphic illustrates four parts. We looked at the bottom two. We looked at the crisis facility, and we looked at the principles and practices associated with operating such a facility. But the literature points to two other important items that really were outside our subcommittee's scope or charge, but we want to mention them. And that is enhancing the call center so that we're coordinating crisis lines, including 911 and in the future 988, to provide for online engagement and response and to guide crisis response assets. And importantly, to create a 24/7, 365 community-based mobile crisis response unit that operates throughout Orange County and responds in lieu of law enforcement. And these are in place in several places around the United States. So where are we? As Kate said, we've already presented to a number of venues on the left, and today we're before you. The next step that the Board of County Commissioners sort of endorsed us moving forward with is design. That is to develop a preliminary design for the facility to begin to get better idea what the budget is and to identify budgeting and financing going forward. And then these other items, which are going to be essential, licensing and staffing, governance, policies and procedures to make sure everything ties into the crisis center and it's used properly, projected savings, and then sources and uses of funds. So with that, I'll stop and turn it over for questions and discussions. Sorry for talking so fast.
No. That was fabulous. Thank you so much, Anthony and Caitlin, for presenting this to us. That was really really helpful. Even going over the material again was helpful, I know, for me. Let's go Jackie, Damon, and then we'll go on to Sammy.
I can't thank you enough for this. It is so needed. It's so long past needed. I'm a social worker. Early in my career, I worked with people who were homeless. I also have members of my family who have experienced mental health crises. It's yes, yes, we need this. One question, maybe it was in there and I didn't see the answer. If somebody was already in jail and they began to experience a mental health crisis, could they then be taken to this facility instead of kept in jail?
I'll let Kate lead on that.
Absolutely. And that is one of sort of the main interests of our justice stakeholders. We often have we can do an IVC. And when we do that now, the person is taken to the emergency room without any of these other services in place, and they're brought back to the jail almost immediately with that, barely with stabilization. And so this would give us an opportunity to use this facility to not only to IVC individuals in need, and by that, involuntary commitments, but also other interests of the court, which can be a capacity evaluation, a forensic evaluation. Those kinds of things often take a long time when a person is in custody. to get in place. And we are able to sometimes get them to come to the jail or get transportation to somewhere else. But this would offer us an opportunity right from the first appearance. A judge could order that and the person could be transported to this facility. So yes, absolutely.
And thank you for that, Caitlin. My other question was, are you working with the Department of Aging at all? I know I had an older family member who, because of being misprescribed drugs, ended up in an emergency room for 20 hours with a mental health crisis. And I noticed a lot of other older people there as well. And I know it's a serious issue with our aging population. Are you working with the Department of Aging at all?
We haven't worked directly with the Department of Aging. The intent, and we'll continue these discussions going forward as we look at staffing and licensing questions. But the intent, going back to that criteria of treat anyone, anytime, anywhere, make sure we can handle not just mental health and substance use disorder narrowly defined, but handle anyone who shows up with a behavior related issue, whether it's IDD or autism or aging. And to be able to handle them at the facility appropriately and provide referrals to treatment services or care services. That's the intent.
Thank you. We need this so badly. Thank you.
Can I just speak to that very point? I think Janice Tyler, who's the director of the Department of Aging here in the county, I think would be a wonderful person to come and present to our subcommittee just about the specific needs as we get further along in the planning process and design. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, both of you. Let's see, moving on from Jackie to Damon and then Sammy.
Yeah. Tony, thanks so much for the presentation. And I really appreciated getting your slides ahead of time too, because they're a really useful resource for those of us who are learning about this work. And Kate, thank you. I really appreciate that Chief ATAC invited you here today. We've got work to do as we've been talking about, right? And not only these issues, but this broader mission that Kate and I have talked about before of, keeping people out of systems that either don't meet their needs or are actively harming them, right? And to the extent that we can be doing that work here in this context or in other work that the town is directly involved with relation to law enforcement practices or other things. I'm really excited about the opportunity to be doing that. And Kate, and you all have certainly been modeling that for a lot of us here locally, so I appreciate the work you're doing. The one question I always like to ask people that are doing this kind of amazing work, and I get to sort of hear about it from you, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, is how can the town of Carrboro be helpful? And I mean that anywhere from on one end of the spectrum, staying out of your way, to all the way on the other end of the spectrum, partnering with you, making sure that town of Carrboro's municipal functions are coordinating appropriately with the work that you all are doing, and everywhere in between. So I just want to throw that out there. You don't expect necessarily some sort of full-blown answer today to that question, but just be thinking about how we at the municipal level, both in Carrboro and in Chapel Hill, and of course in Hillsborough, can be supporting this work that the county is doing, because I'm very excited about it. So thanks.
That's a great question. I just want to comment on it, and that is in the next steps where we talk about policies and procedures that we're going to be looking at. I don't believe it in if you build it, they will come. I think having a facility is great, but having all the entities that are likely to interact with the unit, think about in advance how they will interact with the unit, how their policies and procedures will mesh with being able to use the facility the way we envision it. So I suspect that we'll be working with law enforcement across the county and in other ways with the various towns and other entities, UNC, to make sure that there's alignment among all of the potential players who are going to interact with the new facility. That's my personal take on that general area. Kate, do you want to add anything?
Just, I would hope that you do not stay away, that this is something that you all embrace. Chief ATAC saw the presentation. All our law enforcement chiefs actually fully embraced the model and the need. And actually, just last week, I was with our street outreach team meeting with some of your Carrboro patrol officers, and it wasn't about this crisis diversion facility. It was about our street outreach and getting to know them, and all the work that Carrboro police have been doing to refer people to the street outreach team. But all of them separately started talking about how they're in this terrible predicament often when they're at 2:00 in the morning and they get a call for somebody in crisis, and they go out to the scene, and the person maybe technically could be charged with intoxicated and disruptive, but they don't want to charge them. They want to bring them somewhere, and that Freedom House is full or won't take them for a variety of reasons. And they end up bringing them to the jail because they simply have nowhere else, no place else to call. We don't have a 24/7 mobile crisis team that is functioning the way it should be. There is one at Freedom House, but it does not serve out in the field at all right now, and usually has a very long lag time. So I just think it's something that our law enforcement understands probably better than anyone how critical this need is. And so I would continue to talk about this with everyone that you can. Please present this to your task force that I know you all have here in Carrboro, and as it moves along, just the support of law enforcement and your providers and your folks who are impacted by behavioral health issues in Carrboro. We really welcome everyone's input, and there'll be lots of opportunities that we hope you'll take advantage of.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate. And I think, Jackie talked about this a little bit in her comments too, about kind of everyone, all of us have sort of these personal experiences, right, with someone in our family, someone in our life, either today or previously, who would have benefited from a culture where we have filled these gaps that you've identified, right? And, in my other life, in my work life, I do work with some researchers, some of whom are trying to do similar kinds of process change work in healthcare systems, healthcare settings that you all are trying to do in essentially criminal justice settings, right? And there, just as much as I think it's true that our law enforcement and other actors in these systems will benefit from having better processes in place and better facilities and programs in place. I'm really glad to hear that you're also working with the UNC and their hospitals, and especially in the emergency department, because they too have this problem of being a system that is not helpful to and sometimes actively harmful to folks who need another system to be diverted to, right? So it's just, we have all these systems that could be working better together. I look forward to learning more. Thanks so much.
And our critical partner who couldn't be here tonight is Barbara Ann Bible, who's the Director of Psychiatry Services at UNC, and also the Director of UNC Wakebrook, which is a crisis diversion facility model. And UNC is not necessarily the provider that will ultimately take responsibility for such a facility, but they have been instrumental in recognizing the need and helping us get to this point. So just want to make sure. And also I know a couple of council members are members of the leadership team of the Partnership to End Homelessness, and housing and connection to housing resources is one of the really critical supports that will be available at this facility. If you look at the longer proposal, you will see all of those elements. So just want to make sure and point that out for you, Damon and Barbara.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that, Kate. Let's see, we got Sammy, then Susan, then Randy.
Yeah, I just also want to echo much gratitude for what y'all are doing and timely, given where we are historically in this moment with the BLM movement and a growing awareness of our criminal justice system and all our systems and the way that they are so unjust to so many people. And so I'm very excited about what y'all presented and where we're going with this. And like Damon, I'm also very interested in finding ways in which we can be supportive of y'all's work. Specifically, for example, we are held off on hiring SROs in our police department, and that represents some significant funds, staffing funds. And there's a question as to how we could allocate those funds towards something like that broader crisis system that y'all are describing, we could imagine enhanced crisis response existing. If those two SROs that Carrboro is not going to be hiring, those two staff people were allocated towards such a crisis response entity. Typically, Carrboro represents 15% of the county. If the county did its 45 and Chapel Hill did its 45, we would have a total of 14 staff for such a crisis response thing. So I very much encourage us as a council to think in creative ways of how to advance what we've heard tonight in that ecosystem of the crisis system and how we do law enforcement differently. Think of it more as like care provision. But so related to that imagining I just shared, a question is, in y'all's perspective, in that ecosystem of crisis system, and those four quadrants, the two that you described today, do you feel that different quadrants could happen simultaneously or need to happen in a certain order, or what's your perspective on sequencing there?
So I think they all need to happen. We haven't given a lot of thought to sequencing. There's a line I use sometimes when I'm presenting that says action or inaction on these other items doesn't negate the need to move forward with the crisis facility. So in that sense, they're not dependent on one another. They are enhanced by one another. So I think the facility can and should go forward based on what we now know. I think if we could add a mobile crisis unit, in my own personal opinion, that'd be a significant asset to the community. So that's sort of my said. They're all important. They're all in the best practices literature. But if you make progress on one of them, you can make a real dent in the community services. Kate, you want to add to that?
I appreciate that. And I think, Chief ATAC knows we are starting a crisis collaborative, with our LME or the current LME and maybe the next LME Alliance in Cardinal. And because we simply are lacking in these other areas. And this is a long-term project, obviously, and we need to get these other things in place. Street outreach is a small piece of that, but it's not 24/7. We need a community-led mobile crisis unit, in my opinion. We have crisis units within law enforcement and CIT trained officers, but we need a separate response system, and there's no reason why that couldn't start just as soon as we have available funding for it. And I know that Chapel Hill and Carrboro, as well as the county, are thinking about that. And ARPA funding, I don't know if you saw today what the ARPA funding eligibility indicated. There's a lot of need specifically listed for behavioral health resources. So we're thinking that would be a potential opportunity for not only the initial planning that we're going to contract with here that the county has already agreed to move forward on, but also perhaps an immediate mobile crisis unit.
Great. And again, I encourage the council to think of that commitment of 2 staff people in our police department, those resources, whether it be housed within our police department, or I think technically by the state law that says we can't defund the police, there are creative ways of thinking of this within the police department, but totally different from how police department's been done. So we could be funding this crisis response center ASAP. And leveraging, as you point out, these federal funds that are being made available left and right. So that's very exciting. Thank you so much for that guidance, and look forward to hearing more and collaborating with y'all. One other item I wanted to raise is, this whole behavioral health institution that we used to have got dismantled in large part because of what the term institutionalization represents. So for good reasons, it was dismantled, unfortunately not replaced with anything other than incarceration or emergency services. So I just raised that as a very important historical artifact that we should embed within when you do presentations as an opportunity to make sure we don't fall into that kind of way of doing things, but really think of things as really helping people. And then lastly, I very much inspired by, as Damon pointed out, this is happening within all of our institutions, and an understanding of how to dismantle the systemic way that we do injustice, and it gets expressed as racism most often. It's very deeply rooted in our history, but there are other aspects of it, so very much encouraged by this model, because I feel it can apply not just to behavioral health, but to social. I mean, when you talk about interventions on behavioral health, I could imagine interventions on social health. Like, so much of what these incarceration systems and emergency system represent is ways of helping people in their situations that aren't necessarily always behavioral. They're social in large part too. So I'm very excited. Thank you so much, and I'm very excited about this new phase of where we are in town government, and how we can better allocate resources and support initiatives like y'all's. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Tammy. Before I go on to Susan and then Randy, I just wanted to kind of clarify something about the school resource officers. I don't think that we have already made a decision that we've taken those two positions and frozen them and can divert them immediately. That's something that we have talked about generally, that's going to be part of the charge of this task force to kind of wrap into, solutions, which I'm sure will include some way of funding this crisis diversion facility. But I just wanted to kind of make that clear. That's not my understanding at all, that we've made any kind of decision about that.
Lydia, could I just, I appreciate your perspective. I share that too. I was just raising it because in the budget conversation, it was brought up as like, we're identifying other ways of who to hire, and maybe we're jumping the gun. Our town manager is jumping the gun on that discussion. We need to have a bigger discussion first. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have that as part of our, I guess, budget discussion with regard to that then. All right, let's go on to Susan and then Randy.
Thank you, Lydia. And Kate and Tony, I want to also just sort of express my gratitude for all of the work that you are doing to bring this much needed facility to Orange County. It's tremendously exciting. I want to go back to something Tony said about if we build it, they will come. You all are, this design is, it's so exciting, and it has the potential to fill so many gaps and provide such a broad array of, behavioral health services. Do you worry that it could, the facility could quickly reach capacity? I'm just kind of curious, I know you're not even into the design aspect yet, but where are you in terms of being able to gauge just how much this facility will be utilized?
That's actually very good question. The number I threw out in the presentation of about 300 episodes per month being diverted to the facility was based or is based on data drawn from Orange County. We looked at 911 records, we looked at EMS records, we looked at police department records, we looked at hospital records, we identified cases that had the potential to be diverted because of their characteristics, and then we applied some, high and low level assumptions about the percentage of diversion that could occur, sometimes very, very high, sometimes newer programs a little bit more difficult to do. And that's how we arrived at the 300. We'll continue to revisit that number to make sure it's as accurate as we can make it. And there's also a possibility we'll look at phase development and expansion opportunities as we get more experience with the facility. That would be my thought about that. Kate?
Yeah, it's a really important concern because at UNC Wakebrook, which is the closest facility doing similar diversion work, they actually end up closing their doors to law enforcement 70% of the time because of their extensive walk-ins, which we will have walk-ins as well. But I think the thing that we've learned from that is that we want to make sure that there is an availability always for law enforcement and for EMS. And if that means that, we have to cut down on walk-ins and reserve, bed space for law enforcement, I think we want to include that in our plans, because we don't want a situation where it ends up not being a diversion facility, and because of walk-in needs, we can't serve that diversion need.
Great, thank you. Talk to us just a little bit in terms of the staffing. I haven't heard, from reading the materials, I didn't see mention of, will there be psychiatrists, nursing staff, psychologists? Tell us a little bit about that.
We have, as you saw in the facility, next steps, staffing and licensing is identified as the next step, but we fully envision this to be staffed both with clinical services and social service folks. So clinical services in terms of the same people that would service the psychiatric emergency services down at UNC Emergency Department or behavioral health urgent care. And also social workers and peer support specialists that would facilitate working with people and transitioning to community care. And then people to interact with the criminal justice side of the operation to facilitate diversions from criminal justice. So one of the models would be what Wakebrook has. Wakebrook is a medical facility operated by UNC Psychiatric Services and provides a full range of clinical psychiatric care. Mm-hmm. Kate? You lost Kate?
I'm sorry, I have nothing else to add.
And I'm going to add just one more question. So I want to go to Sammy's point about the deinstitutionalization in behavioral health. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand actually that has led to a shortage of psychiatric beds in hospitals. And I don't know if that's the case here in Orange County. If it is the case, to what extent, is the really long-term goal with all of this to one day build next to the crisis diversion facility a hospital with perhaps an ER?
Well, Barbara Ann, unfortunately, is not with us today, and she's probably the best one to answer your question. I think the primary goal of facilities like this across the country is to transition people from crisis care to community services, as opposed to inpatient beds. And the numbers in the literature are that can be facilitated with proper crisis care and with proper peer support to help guide the person into community treatment services that are available in the community. But that doesn't mean that there's work to be done by enhancing the number of community treatment providers and capacity there. But I think the preference is for community-based treatment and building up that capacity as opposed to inpatient beds.
Right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for all that. And then Randy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caitlin and Anthony. I want to applaud you on this work and getting it to this point. I want to applaud the potential of communitizing wraparound services and moving things in that direction. I also want to tell you that I really enjoyed reading through the PowerPoint slides. I think Damon mentioned that. And a very special shout out to Sheriff Blackwell for raising the potential of creating the crisis diversion program within the facility. I think that's great. It's inspiring to see that as a county, where law enforcement, community safety, we're thinking about things in terms of not only what we're aware of, but to go to Anthony's point, that you're taking serious action and you're now at the advocacy phase. And to that, I think Damon mentioned the task force, our community safety task force. Sammy and I worked on that with council, and Caitlin, and you mentioned, having this presentation shared. I would like to ask very specifically that you all intend to share directly with the task force early on, because I think it's really important when our task force gets up and running, that they see these components that you've mentioned, these programmatic components, the potential for the mobile units, the potential for crisis units that are available 24/7, the potential of the ARPA funding. I think these are things that, rather than coming at the back end, it would be really helpful for our task force folks, whomever they are, to realize that the interest and the resources of the county are behind a very big idea. It's so exciting. I just, I'm delighted to see this. And I think the last thing I want to say is, teaching for many decades, one of the things that I would say to administrators and fellow teachers, colleagues, parents, is that behavior is how people get their needs met. But when you take that statement and you look at it in terms of a crisis diversion, you realize we are moving now to truly having needs met rather than institutionalizing because we can't truly meet the needs. So I thank you, and just in any way that we can, be of further assistance, and have our task force work with you all to break down and dismantle the silos. Count us in. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for those comments, Randy. Thanks again to, I think Susan's hands up from earlier, I think that is. But thanks again, Anthony and Kate, for being here with us and explaining the report and answering all of our questions and giving us even more information. We really, really appreciate it. Kathy, do we need to pass any motion or anything, or we just heard this report? Do we need to pass a motion accepting it or anything?
I think you're just receiving this report. Is that right, Chief?
Just receiving it, Chief?
Yes, just an update on the process was it. So you're kind of in the loop was the intent.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for bringing it to us.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I didn't have my hand up, Lydia, so you didn't miss anything. Sorry.
All right, good.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So this seems like some kind of aha light bulb moment type thing, which I feel like it shouldn't be, because these needs have been around for a long time. So I'm just trying to figure out, has this ever come up before? Has there ever been any attempt to have even a semblance of what we're talking about now? And thank you for your presentation too. It's start to see on the screen, just how many gaps that there are. And I, like Councilmember Gist, and maybe a few others on the screen, we know up close and personal, having had family members who, have mental health and behavioral issues, and things happen, and the first person that shows up is the police. and it's just like, it's that stigma that's attached to it, and could actually be embarrassing, for that person. It's just like, hey, what, I need psychiatric help, I need some medical attention, but here's the police. Not the police's fault, that's just the way, that is set up. But I did want to know, has there ever been anything similar that's been tried before? And also the second part of my question is there a time frame? All this looks really good, and I would love to see it come around sooner rather than later, but we know things don't happen that quickly.
So in terms of when we say we looked at other facilities across the United States, so some of those facilities have been operating for quite a while, and a lot of them are brand new. So this is something that's happening. It's happening in more and more places. Certainly policy institutes like SAMHSA and the Council of State Governments, their Justice Center, are moving in the direction of encouraging these facilities to become part of the community's services and to integrate with hospitals and law enforcement to provide a better response. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, this has been thought about for a while. It seems like even absent the racial justice movement and issues from the last year in the summer, these were moving in the direction of becoming more frequently used in communities. I think that seems to me to be accelerating. So that's that part of it. Kate?
I agree. I think the Stepping Up initiative, which formed back in 2014, I believe, really started addressing the issue of the number of people with behavioral health issues ending up in our jails, and started focusing on work in the counties. And that has led, I think, to the sequential intercept mapping process and the intersections with behavioral health in the criminal justice system. So I think the work has really begun nationally in earnest in the last 5 years or so. But I think the defund the police movement deserves an incredible amount of credit for the urgency that I think municipalities now are looking at these issues, and a great credit to our law enforcement here locally, who have really said this is an opportunity for us to say we don't want to be the people answering these behavioral health calls. So I think it's a crystallization of a lot of different events.
And is there a time frame attached to this? I know there's some more things that have got to be done before, but is there a time frame, like maybe 3 years or 5 or less?
Less. I tend to be impatient, I would say, on the shorter end of that. But we're just beginning thanks to the Board of County Commissioners to allow us to move forward by hiring a design firm to do some preliminary design work. And I suppose one of the outcomes of that would be getting some sense of not only funding, but also sort of construction and development. There are licensing issues that are going to have timeframes for approval from various regulatory agencies. And then there's the all-important question of, making sure we find the funding. So I'm not in a position to provide a time estimate, except Kate will tell you I tend to be impatient.
No.
So we'll move as quickly as possible. How's that?
Well, I mean, that's good to hear, because there are really some vulnerable folks within our community, and it's just really time for their needs to really be elevated and addressed. And I know we've been trying to do that, in other ways. Thus all these gaps, right? We do the best we can. Especially our police department, who usually, ends up getting, hemmed up in these situations. It's just like, hey, right. So it's just good to know that this is happening. I appreciate all your work in the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, great. Again, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it and enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, the council members, we are an hour behind schedule. We have 2 items left. We have another item that Susan's going to bring up, which I think will be kind of quick. She emailed it around all of us, and then we have a closed session. So what I'd like to do is, and the last item, the facilities rehabilitation session, it's scheduled for an hour. I don't know if it'll take that long or not. I kind of find it hard to believe it would take that long, but let's just talk about this for a minute. The next item is this one about a text amendment related to parking requirements. I'd like to get a sense if anyone's going to have any kind of opposition or extended comments about that. If you are, I don't see anyone with any. I'm just asking if Damon, do you have a problem with their extended comments?
No, I don't, and I would hope that we would just move it right along.
Right. So I think that we could probably just get with that one, and then Julie, okay, all right. So let's go ahead. So I guess what I'm saying for this next item, Julie, I'm not even sure if we need any kind of a presentation or anything. I think everyone here is okay with setting the public hearing. Damon?
I'd like to move that we set the public hearing as directed, as requested by the staff.
All right, is there a second by Randy? All right, all in favor say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Me, aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Sammy? Damon?
Aye.
And Susan?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we've gotten that item taken care of. And then the facilities rehabilitation, Julie, again, it's set up for an hour. If we could ask our presenters to kind of just be aware of the time here, but we'll go ahead and go with them. And then after that, we have the item that Susan had emailed us about, and then we have our closed session. So let's go ahead and bring them on.
Okay, so your next item is the facilities rehabilitation, the energy and sustainability systems overview. Looks like we have Jim Spencer here to present for that one.
Hey everyone.
Hi, Jim.
So I believe that we're going to try to be really brief tonight, and this presentation is largely going to be done by Christian Kaltreiter, our consultant from Sood Associates, on the energy analysis and recommendations for net zero studies. Ben may have, I don't know if Ben wants to do any quick introduction on the background, but otherwise I'll turn it over to Christian. Is Ben on?
Is that you, Ben?
Yes.
There you are. Okay.
Yeah, I had a couple slides, but it's basically, this is a kind of a continuation from last week's presentation, and we have Dr. Sood and Christian Kaltreiter to talk about the energy and sustainability systems for our facilities, and we'll go ahead and jump in. Christian will be presenting.
Okay, can I be heard?
Yes, sir. Yes, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen then. Okay, is everyone seeing the presentation, HVAC upgrade concepts?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, I will fly past a few slides, but again, this is discussions of moving towards net zero and rehabilitating a few sites at the town of Carrboro, Town Hall, Century Center, and Public Works. I'm going to completely skip by 2 slides and move straight to the meat of the presentation. I will say before I start, a good bit of what we discussed so far and our part in this has been working with the town of Carrboro, or kind of helping the town of Carrboro to come up with a definition, an official definition of net zero. What does net zero building mean to the town of Carrboro? And through a number of presentations and discussions, the choosing to define net zero based on the metric of greenhouse gas emissions is what was determined. And it was also determined to allow the clean energy used to offset greenhouse gas emissions to be generated not just on the building or on the building site, but also off-site on property owned by the town. So moving forward to specific HVAC and sustainability upgrade recommendations. At the Century Center, we have looked at or come up with a couple of primary options that we think are worth considering. And the first, sort of most obvious one, is to keep the existing system types. Upgrading systems, upgrading equipment, upgrading operation, but keeping the general system type. The HVAC systems at the Century Center are based on hot water and chilled water, so they're a central boiler, a central chiller, providing heat and cooling to the building. And then it has 3 large air handling units which push the warmed or cooled air out into the space. And while the Century Center, as it's operated, is not extremely energy efficient, this system type certainly can be. There's a lot of flexibility with this system type. It's very effective for comfort, for dehumidification, for efficiency strategies. If we keep the existing system type, then it allows reuse of a lot of equipment, the existing piping, ducting, air handling units. Looking at the equipment that is currently there, the boiler is new. It's very efficient. On the other hand, it is a natural gas boiler, and continuing to use it does not aid the town's stated goal of moving towards electricity as a fuel source rather than natural gas. So that is a decision to be made, weighing on the one side a new, very efficient boiler, weighing on the other side it uses gas. On the chiller side of things for the Century Center, the chiller is old and not efficient, and regardless of whether net zero upgrades were being planned or not, the chiller would be slated for replacement. And that provides opportunity. For instance, one thing that we think is worth looking into would be considering a heat recovery chiller as an option. And this is a piece of equipment where the waste heat from generating cooling can be used to help offset the heating for the building. So it would be essentially replacing some natural gas heat with recovered waste electrical heat. And this would aid the goal of going towards electricity and away from natural gas. And then it's interesting because a chiller replacement is needed one way or the other. The upfront cost of using a more expensive piece of equipment like a heat recovery chiller, the upfront cost is the incremental cost, really, just the extra cost above what a standard chiller would cost. And then with any upgrade, we would want to improve operation. The building is in need of new HVAC controls, and so with a new control system would then be applied the best efficiency strategies that could be tailored to that building. And then sort of a separate concept is this idea of addressing areas of the building that are in use for extended hours separately from the rest of the building. So certain police areas, I guess, are considered occupied 24/7, whereas most of the building is usually 8 to 5. It could be an effective efficiency strategy to actually have completely separate small system for those extended hour areas so that you're not having to run a large chiller or large boiler and large air handling unit just because there's one section that is occupied for an extra 16 hours out of the day. But moving on to option 2. So this is a second option for the same building that could be considered, which would be variable refrigerant flow air handling units with VAV boxes. And so with this, the part of that, which is the air handling units with VAV boxes, is really exactly the same as what is already there. So in a large part, this also is reusing the existing systems. However, the primary difference is it is replacing the existing chiller with variable refrigerant flow, or VRF, condensing units, and there would be one VRF system dedicated to each air handling unit. And we could even investigate the possibility of reusing the existing air handling units. There's a good possibility they could be reused. That depends on a few factors, one of which is the condition of the air handlers. But regardless, the ductwork and the VAV boxes would be able to be reused. And so the VRF system it's a heat pump type of system. So it provides both cooling and heating. And in this case, it would provide the majority of the heating and would take away the need for most of the heat coming from the natural gas boiler. But in the system that we have initially imagined, the natural gas boiler would still be in service for reheat, which is primarily summertime heat usage. And so that would be through the existing VAV boxes, existing hot water piping, existing equipment. And so this approach clearly furthers the goal of electrification. Your natural gas usage would go way down. With a new system like this would be new controls as well and efficient operational strategies. And kind of like the heat recovery chiller, the upfront cost of this concept really is incremental in light of the fact that a new chiller is already needed. So rather than getting a new chiller, you'd be getting new VRF units associated with each air handler. Moving on to the town hall. The town hall is currently served with just separate single zone heat pumps, all electric. There is no ventilation air provided. And so we are recommending a complete redesign of systems. It would still be complete electricity-based systems, but using the most state-of-the-art efficiency and equipment and strategies that are currently available. VRF air handlers with VAV boxes, really kind of coincidentally, we came up with that separately for each building, but that would be one possible option and maybe a front runner for meeting the various goals that the town would have for that building. In selecting and designing any system, we would want to consider any new occupancy types or schedules being introduced to the building, and as well as what scheduling changes that may end up happening through what we have learned from the whole COVID experience with more and more work from home culture. That type of work environment allows new operational saving strategies, not treating a building as occupied all the time, every day, in every space. And so beyond HVAC systems, this building is also ripe for new efficient lighting, and along with that, lighting controls, meaning occupancy sensors and daylighting sensors in the areas where daylighting is, there is a daylighting resource. That's the town hall. I'm moving quickly. I hope this is for the best, but there will be plenty of time for questions. So moving on to Public Works. Public Works is a little bit up in the air as to what's going to happen at that site. It's a large site. It's in the floodplain for the most part. And there is considerable redesign being considered. So we have divided our recommendations into a more short-term and more long-term categories. So in the short term, it's just focus on system operation as opposed to focusing on system upgrades. Just make the most of the existing systems, because we don't really know how long those systems and buildings will be operating in the capacity they are right now. And then as needed, of course, if a new piece of equipment is needed, then upgrade, using the high efficiency state-of-the-art equipment and selecting system types that are tailored to the particular space needs for the spaces they would be serving. site renovation and rebuild, then we would suggest taking that opportunity to plan for sustainability by, for instance, making provisions for rooftop photovoltaics. So any building that is relocated or redesigned or built brand new, its roof can be made PV ready, basically. Make it ready to put photovoltaics on top. A is in the floodplain and is not buildable. However, we don't know of a reason that a photovoltaic field could not be installed in a floodplain as long as proper precautions are taken, and that could be a very good usage of floodplain property. And then it's also probably a decent assumption that the town of Carrboro will begin using more and more electric vehicles as the future moves on. And so incorporating charging stations and other electric fleet infrastructure would make a lot of sense as a long-term plan for the public works. So moving to net zero in any of these facilities, as we've said a few times before, the first step is to conserve. It generally costs less to do efficiency upgrades and no-cost operation strategies than it does to install new renewable energy. But once you've kind of tapped the conservation out, then it's time to install renewable energy. There are a lot of interesting, exciting, innovative, clean energy sources out there, ways to do it. But I'm sorry to tell you that the most likely solution for the town of Carrboro will be boring old solar photovoltaics, because they are reliable, well-tested, long-lasting, and probably the most economic solution for our area and for the scale that we're talking about. Almost certainly need to be off-site from the buildings. The Century Center in particular has very little space other than its own roof for photovoltaics, and that will almost certainly not be enough to offset the greenhouse gases produced by the building. Town Hall, on the other hand, does have several on-site options. The Farmers Market Pavilion, there's some green space adjacent to the building, rooftops. And so it has more opportunity, but very likely it would make sense to supplement with off-site clean energy there as well. And that leads to the concept of economy of scale, where putting in larger, simpler systems is going to be more effective than more small, scattered systems. It's just going to cost less per kilowatt hour saved to install a large optimized system, as opposed to a bunch of panels here and a few panels there and a parking lot system there, etc. So I'm thinking that it makes sense to, from a practical standpoint, to not necessarily look at each site as its own little island that has to create net zero for itself, but more to look at the town of Carrboro, or at least a conglomeration of the three sites, as a single entity, achieving net zero together as a team. That, to me, is a more practical way to get a final cost-effective solution that really ends up having a lot of effect. And I'm going on the assumption I've gathered from the various meetings that the town of Carrboro is interested in really being the change, not just sort of inspiring the change, and that the not as interested in just putting up solar panels at the entryway of a building as a showpiece to inspire people to be interested in such things, but more to put up systems that are that's just my own perspective on how it seems Carrboro's headed. So the unfortunate thing is that sort of heads towards the more boring and not necessarily as interesting solutions, but that's how things get done. So that's the end of this presentation. So I guess we can open it up to questions.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Christian, for that presentation. Just FYI, a couple of times you came in and out just a little bit, but it was only about 3 or 4 seconds, then you came back in. So I think we didn't miss really much of a beat. Just wanted to let you know that. So, but
okay, thank you.
That was really, really interesting and helpful. Talking about how we could approach each of these 3 big facilities. So let's get some feedback from council members. Let's start with Sammy.
Thank you for that work and that presentation, Christian and Ish and Jim. Question on like low-hanging fruit. You identify efficiency as kind of the first thing you want to do before the renewables aspect. And I was curious as to whether you have any recommendations in terms of increasing, for example, the blown-in insulation in the Century Center, which I read is 9 inches. And you can get some efficiency there. Or for that matter, when we do the town hall, insulating the walls by putting in stud walls, and I don't know, doing insulation is kind of one of the first things to do, and I think that there's maybe some opportunity there, and especially with the Century Center and the town hall. Any perspectives on that?
I can say a little bit, and then I'll pass it on to Ish and or Jim. But one is that's one of the purposes of the energy models that we've built, is to be able to assess the effect of improvements like that. And we can mathematically model how much energy will be saved by spending the money to fur out the walls and insulate them. In general, the more effective thing than insulating the walls is to address the windows on both the heating side and the cooling side, for both the solar heat gain as well as just the temperature gain and loss through the glass. So just with those couple of things as my input, Jim, do you have anything to add on that?
I think you hit it on the head there with that. One of the projects already under consideration is window replacement, particularly at Town Hall, but we've also talked about it at Century Center, and with kind of the common goals of returning the Town Hall to the most historic look we can. I think we could also gain a lot of energy efficiency and replacement windows. The kind of storefront or aluminum windows that are in there, that technology's come a good way, and would have to carefully consider the shading coefficients and whether to use a certain kind of low E glass and the type of windows. But I think that would be worth investigating, striking a balance of aesthetics with the building and just the loss, infiltration you can have through windows, and also the heat gain you can have on them. So I think it's worth looking at the insulation for sure, but windows I think is a big opportunity.
Yeah, and I'll mention one other thing. That it can be troublesome trying to insulate historic walls, because you change the temperature and humidity characteristics of what that wall is experiencing, and potentially can cause real damage by not insulating properly and putting the vapor barrier in just the right spot. So there's a certain I don't want to say danger, but it's sometimes not done simply because of the fear of damaging the building by insulating it.
Okay, but it seems like you could blow it in the attic, increase that, for example. It could be, so you have a model. I'm curious to understand the process of how much more that model will be used to inform the designing that Jim, for example, is doing. And tonight you proposed a couple of things having to do with the chillers, and the ones that you enumerated, but it looks like there's still some more exploration for these other arenas. And one of the big items of energy use, for example, is the plug-in load. And I was curious to understand what opportunities there may be for reducing that. I know that power strips, then it's dependent on the user to hit the button, but maybe timers with power strips. Is there a way in which to minimize plug-in loads, for example? So two questions there. One, how will this energy model further inform the designing to fully realize the opportunities for energy efficiency? And two, more specifically, the plug-in load question.
Okay, well, I'll start with the plug-in loads first. It's been a troublesome one historically. Plug loads have kind of been the piece of the pie that just kind of doesn't shrink. It just stays there while everything else shrinks. And there are definitely efforts that have been made, widespread computer management systems and occupancy sensors that shut off certain pieces of equipment or put them into sleep mode. And I am personally not super up to date on what is working now, though most of them have had mixed success, and users often don't like these systems and they end up going by the wayside and not being used. Has been what I've seen on projects. So it's definitely something worth researching. The good news is a lot of equipment is just smarter and better of its own accord, or can be programmed to be smarter and better of its own accord. Other pieces are not. Other pieces, we're using more and more plug-in stuff at the same time. So it's definitely worth considering. And I don't have like a great, here's the product we want to use, or here's the strategy we want to use answer. But it has been a knotty problem for a decade or more, or two. And there are solutions, and I haven't known one that's everyone loves yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And on the modeling, I have to go to Ish and Jim on that, because that kind of gets into our scope of work and what we're hired to do. So I'm going to go to Jim and Ish on that one.
Well, the model is there, and it can be used to model any of these options that we are talking about. So we've created a model of the building. We have simulated the existing systems to see how much they use annually. Now, there's obviously that same model can be used to simulate other systems. So you don't have to create a new model from scratch for the building. The building geometry is there, the building wall area is there, the window area is there. So if you change a window, you go ahead and in the model, all you do is you change the U value and the shading coefficient, and you can run that model with the new window to see how much the window would affect it.
Thank you, Ish. I guess my question is, who is going to do that analysis? I mean, I appreciate the model, and my question is, like, if we're going to come up with a program and design, we're going to fund it, how are we going to make sure that we integrate with the energy efficiency opportunities? It sounds like there's more work to assess and fully define the full range of options.
Well, I guess we are hoping we'd be hired to do that. So we'd use the same model to further the process, as we as we go further and further, the first thing is to do the energy analysis, then the same model will be used for designing and sizing the systems, and the same model will be used for analyzing the systems. So that's
okay. Thank you. I just thanks for that's the answer. I just encourage Jim and Julie to share with a manager. At least for me, there's an interest in integrating the energy efficiency in these upgrades, and that we do it simultaneously and in time. Thank you so much for all the work.
Can I just add one quick thing, Sammy, because it's
Sure.
a good point. There's so just on scope of work, we do have in our scope of work some small small portions of individual products. Projects for the facilities, including potentially window replacement at Town Hall, chiller replacement at Century Center. I agree that a more holistic approach might be, better on the facilities, kind of incorporating some of the other things you've brought, to mention tonight. But those would be certainly considered, as we talk about replacing the windows. We had talked a little bit before about that. We wanted to defer decisions on the exact method of window replacement at Town Hall to see what this whole study kind of brought to bear. We might have bigger fish to fry on it. So I think there will be some of the modeling and analysis incorporated into these individual projects once we kind of get all your feedback and talk with Ben about pinpointing which particular projects to take on sooner rather than later.
Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Sammy. Jackie, then Randy.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. As always, you go above and beyond what we've asked for, and I really appreciate the work that you all always do. I know that we're looking at, as we reemerge, that buildings will be used differently and that we may not be at full capacity all of the time. And I thank you for addressing that. My other question is, as we look at new HVAC systems, we'll also need to be looking at systems that keep the air cleaner than it is now, that disinfect the air. How will those systems impact efficiency, and will they impact cost? Or please tell me if my question isn't right. This is a social worker asking an engineering question, but I know we're going to have to change our systems to keep the air safe.
Yeah, I can address that. The way to keep the systems basically, or the air in the building cleaner, you try to do three things. One is you try to capture any particulates or viruses that are there. The other is you try to kill them, or you try to dilute the air. These are the three different techniques you can do to reduce the concentration of pathogens in the air. And yes, the new systems, we definitely have a good ventilation, and that's the dilution side. And we use a better filtration, almost like the standard used to be MERV 8, just 8 is a measure of filtration. And now the standard has pretty much gone to MERV 13, and MERV 16 being just about the highest that you can put. But that requires very special systems. So MERV 13 can be accommodated in normal systems. And then the third one is the kill. And you can have UV radiation onto the air as it is passing through ducts and coils. When you're redoing a system, it is not too expensive to add it. I mean, it costs money, but if you look at the total cost of an HVAC system, it is not really that expensive. Then there is another technology which is relatively new, doesn't have a track record, but people claim it does a lot, and that's bipolar ionization. So it's just these three techniques: you dilute, you capture, or you kill the pathogens in the air, and you try to do all three of them. There's no guarantee that they'll go away, but you want to minimize the concentration, and you use these three things in combination. Without going 100% on any one, you try to optimize these three.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I understood. But I would also really appreciate it if, when you make your final recommendations as we move down the line, that air purification, particularly as it deals with pathogens, will be part of that final recommendation, because this isn't going away.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. We will take that into account.
Thank you.
The term used in our industry is indoor air quality. That's the typical term used.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. And thank you for that, Mr. Said. Randy.
Oh, I was taking notes on that. Thank you, Ish. That was great. And Jim and Christian, I just had, and this is kind of like a simple question, because to get to net zero, there are like 8 or 9 components. But one of the things in, let's say, looking at solar, we're looking at soft costs, things like the the design and the installation and whatnot. And I'm just wondering what percentage, I mean, when we're thinking about this and thinking about, and I like Christian's idea of thinking as it as a overall for the downtown, not building by building, because that's the way we're going to be able to address this. But if you think of solar that way, then there are these other soft costs that go with it. What percentage of a total package could those soft costs be?
If you wanted some round numbers, about 15% would be a number to put down it. That doesn't mean, it couldn't be more or it couldn't be a little less, but that'd be, Jim, what do you think?
Sorry. Yes, I think 15 is a good starting place. It definitely, because of the age and historic nature of these buildings, I might round that up slightly depending on the systems, but I think 15 to 20 is a good number to start with.
Yeah, and so I really appreciate that you're helping us. You're framing this for us to think about it in terms of systems that are maybe working together into a larger framework, and thinking about how we could create solar in different places that can accommodate for solar in order to take care of this. So one of the things that I've been wondering for a long time, and I don't know whether this is something that you folks have thought of, but we have ample space on the perimeter of Anderson Park for solar arrays. And when I try to think of this in terms of going big, that's what I think of, in addition to the pavilion roofs at Town Hall. I think in future we need to be looking at some of the park open space on the perimeters to enhance the solar arrays that we could provide. I really appreciate Christian realizing and identifying that we have an authentic commitment, and it's not just window dressing. And I do appreciate you, Jim, for underscoring the importance of the the temperature change capture with the appropriate windows. And that's something that, not only looking at those 3 buildings, but I also think we need to check on our fire stations as well. So thank you for that. And I really appreciate the work that you've done.
Thanks,
Thank
Randy.
you.
Thanks. Good comments, Randy. Okay. Anyone else? If not, Ben, have you gotten some good direction and thoughts from us?
Yes, thank you. And just to kind of summarize where this is going, we do have our immediate needs list, and a chiller upgrade is on that list. So it is a priority for Public Works, and we will have Sud run some energy calculations on both those options and bring that to you as part of the final recommendation.
Okay, great. Thank you. We I guess we look forward to that then. Randy, your hand's still up from before, is that right? Yeah. Okay, just checking. All right. Okay, so Kathy, with this, do we need to do anything other than just should we make a motion to receive the report?
Ben, what's best for you moving forward?
No, that's not necessary. Well, the final report, definitely, but tonight was more of a discussion.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you so much, then, Ben, and also Ish and Christian. Thank you for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you.
Y'all take care.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, y'all, before we go into our closed session, Susan, you want to go ahead and bring up that item you emailed us about?
Yes. This will take just about a minute. So I shared with everybody, I think it was yesterday, some information about Chapel Hill's efforts to increase its WMBE, DBE contracting targets. Barbara and Sammy and I have talked about this, and we're all hoping that we can do something similar here in Carrboro, but not just setting targets, but trying to meet targets. And we did get some information from Bob Hornick, which is suggesting that with public projects such as the 203, that the town may actually have a little bit more leverage in helping us meet those targets. So the 3 of us would like to direct the town manager to ask staff to review Chapel Hill's proposal for increasing its contracting targets, to review some what nearby jurisdictions are doing with this, to review Bob Hornick's comments on some leverage that the town may have with public projects such as the 203, and then to make some recommendations to council on increasing MWBE, DEB participation in our procurement policies. So that would, the hope is that we could get something back by the fall. David thought that maybe in September, October, we could get something back, and that would give us time to look at those recommendations and hopefully be able to put them in place in time for the bids going out on the 203 project, either at the end of the year or early part of 2022.
Okay, and so that's a motion by Susan, a second by Barbara. Okay, is there any discussion? And then also I see we have our budget guru, Arch, here. I don't know, Arch, do you have any questions or comments, or are you here just because you don't have anything else to do this late on a Tuesday night? Or I can't hear you, but I know you're saying something.
I think you're on mute, Arch.
Yeah, you're on mute, Arch, if you're saying anything. So
I was saying I just don't have anything else to do this time of the night.
there you go. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here with us. So, all right. So we have I think we all kind of understand what this is about. Thank you. Also, really, thank you for sending that to us in advance. That was very helpful. So, motion by Susan, second by Barbara. All in favor, and Julie, so you understand this, referring to all in favor, say aye. Damon?
Aye, and thank you.
Yeah. Jackie?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Randy?
And I appreciate Sammy, Barbara, and Susan for bringing this. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Me, I, and Barbara.
Aye.
All right, awesome, y'all. Okay. All right, let's have a motion to go into closed session by
So moved.
So second.
Sammy, second by Randy. All in favor, say aye. Damon,
Aye.
Jackie,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
Randy,
Aye.
me, aye. Barbara,
Aye.
aye. Okay. All right, let's wait a minute here until we make sure everyone's off.